Chapter 574. Shao Qingyuan's background. Gu Yundong looked at him, and could not help but pinch his hand. Don't think too much. What you need now is to recuperate. Nothing else is important. Also, it's alright with my father. Other than overly loving his daughter, he's actually very reasonable. She went out to call Tongping. Tongping came in and changed his dressing. Sure enough, the wound had opened up a little. Fortunately, it was not very serious. Gu Yundong fed him medicine. Seeing that he had closed his eyes and fallen asleep again, she quietly left the room. However, as soon as she left, Shao Qingyuan opened his eyes and looked at the beam above his head. No one knew what he was thinking. The Gu family's house was very peaceful this night. Gu Yundong knew that her father had accepted Shao Qingyuan. She felt relieved and slept peacefully. However, she did care about Shao Qingyuan's injuries, so when she woke up early in the morning, she quickly ran to his room. Shao Qingyuan had already sat up. Tongping had come over to change his dressing at dawn. He had just finished his porridge. Gu Yundong stepped forward and placed a hand on his forehead. Good, he did not have a recurring fever, and he was in much better spirits than yesterday. His recovery ability was indeed very powerful. From the moment she entered, Shao Qingyuan's gaze had been on her. His eyes were so gentle that they were almost watery. Gu Yundong slowly felt uncomfortable under his gaze, and could not help but glare at him. If you keep staring at me, when my father comes later, you'll be chased home. Do you believe me? Yundong doesn't want me to go back? Shao Qingyuan said and reached out to hold her hand. His hand was warm, and the weather was still a little cool early in the morning. Gu Yundong's small hand was cold. When he held it, he instantly felt a burning heat surge to his heart. Gu Yundong was speechless. Shao Qingyuan was extremely satisfied. After holding her hand long enough, he finally let go of her. Go and call Uncle Gu. There are some things that shouldn't be hidden anymore. Gu Yundong was stunned. You, Shao Qingyuan took a deep breath. I'm very calm now. With you around, those things can't hurt me anymore. After a pause, he opened his mouth again and asked nervously, is it true that no matter what I say, you won't leave me? Gu Yundong did not know what kind of battle he had gone through that night. She only knew that at this moment, Shao Qingyuan had an unprecedented vulnerability and urgently needed her affirmation. Hence, she took his hand again and interlocked her fingers with his. She nodded and said, as long as you haven't done anything to let me down, I won't leave you even if you're a monster. Strictly speaking, Gu Yundong's background was a little mysterious. Shao Qingyuan seemed to relax and look down at their intertwined hands. One was tanned and the other was fair. One was rough and the other delicate. It was as if there was a thread tightly wrapped between the two hands. It was magically reassuring. Okay. His voice was very low. Gu Yundong almost did not hear him clearly. Go and summon Uncle Gu. Gu Yundong left. After a while, Gu Dajiang entered. He did not bring anyone but himself and Gu Yundong. After entering the room, he closed the door. Shao Qingyuan was leaning against a blanket. After seeing the two of them sit down, he slowly spoke. Old Master Li said that he carried me out of the mountains. Actually, that's not the case. Chapter 575. He has grandpa. When Shao Qingyuan was brought back to the Li family, he was not even a year old, and did not know how to walk. How was he brought home? He was too young at that time and had no impression of it. From the moment he could remember, it was his life in the Li family after he was 3 or 4 years old. Old Master Li brought him back. The Li family's eldest son only had 2 daughters at that time, so Old Master Li put Shao Qingyuan under their name. However, the Li family's eldest son and his wife did not like this child who had suddenly appeared. It was as if they could no longer give birth to a son, making the entire village laugh. Moreover, Mrs. Li, or Madame Bao, was already pregnant at that time. She felt that this was definitely a son. Unexpectedly, it was another daughter. It was Li Chuanxiang, who had come to the Gu family's workshop to look for a job. She was only a year younger than Shao Qingyuan. When Madame Bao heard that it was a daughter again, there was no telling if it was because she was afraid of being criticized or something, but she pushed all the blame to Shao Qingyuan, and said that he was a jinx. He was the one who caused her to lose her son. Shao Qingyuan's life in the Li family had become exceptionally difficult. Even though he was still young at that time, he often starved and froze. He was 2 or 3 years old, but he was still so skinny that he could not even walk steadily. At that time, Qingyuan could already vaguely remember things and understood that he was not a child of the Li family. Although he was a little disappointed, he still felt that it was already very lucky for him to have a place to stay. Besides, he had his grandfather. When he was beaten, Grandpa would take the ointment and comfort him while applying it. After he was scolded, Grandpa would also scold and blame his foster parents. When he was hungry, Grandpa would secretly feed him half of the sweet potatoes he had kept. If he was cold, Grandpa would modify his old clothes for him to wear. Therefore, it didn't matter. Compared to many homeless children, Qingyuan felt very happy. He was very satisfied. He worked especially hard. His small figure often carried a wooden bucket that was taller than him to feed the pigs. He carried a huge basket to hunt for pig grass. When he returned home, he would always have injuries all over his body due to the bumps. When faced with his grandfather's pained gaze, he would always comfort him sensibly. "It's not hard on me." However, when little Qingyuan was 5 years old, Madame Bao was pregnant again. She already had 3 daughters in the past. This time she had to get a boy in one fell swoop. She was so excited that she could not care less about finding trouble with little Qingyuan. Even though her 3 daughters would occasionally order this adopted son around. However, a few days before she was about to give birth, Madame Bao suddenly had a nightmare. In her dream, someone told her that there was a jinx blocking her way at home. He was selfish and domineering and did not allow other boys to share her love. Therefore, it would be difficult for Madame Bao to give birth to a son. When Madame Bao woke up, her face was pale. She immediately thought of little Qingyuan, and immediately shook her husband awake. The two of them hated Shao Qingyuan to death. The next morning, Father Li quietly knocked him out and carried him into the mountains. "Go back to where you came from. This is your own life." He directly left him at the 9 Tigers Mountain. When little Qingyuan woke up, he was faced with a black monkey covered in fur. It stared at him with its round eyes. He was terrified and turned to run. However, he was young and in the mountains. He only ran a few steps before he slid down the hill. However, before he could care about the pain, he was carried away by the monkey that was even taller than him. Chapter 576. The second time one could imagine how a child who was only so young lived in the mountains. The monkey treated him like a toy. It would carry him up the tree at any time and throw him to play with other monkeys. There were a few times when he was almost thrown to the ground. Little Qingyuan was so frightened that he cried. However, he did not know why he was here. He also did not know the way home. He missed his grandfather. He didn't want to be with these monkeys. He felt like he was going to die. He was thirsty, tired, and hungry. But no matter how much he cried for help, no one came to his rescue. Later on, he realized that these monkeys seemed to know how to imitate his movements. Therefore, he tried his best to squeeze out a smile. His face was clearly covered in injuries and he did not have any strength, but he still tried his best to pretend to be very happy and play with them, fighting with them. Perhaps because he was slowly getting familiar with them, the monkeys stopped playing with him and let down their guard. They no longer guarded him at all times. Therefore, when he encountered a few yellow-throated martens one day, those monkeys ran away in a hurry before they could bring him along. Little Qingyuan also fell into a bush while running, but he avoided the yellow-throated martens. But he had also become alone. Little Qingyuan did not know what to do and could only find a direction to walk in. It was not that he had not encountered other animals on the way. He was also afraid, but when he followed the monkeys previously, he had learned a little instinct to avoid danger. When he was hungry, he would pick those very low-growing fruits to eat. He didn't even know if they were poisonous, but if he didn't eat, he wouldn't have the strength. He wanted to go back and find his grandfather. He didn't want to die here. Fortunately, he was still in the periphery of the 9 Tigers Mountain, and had not encountered any ferocious beasts. After walking aimlessly for 3 days, when he was avoiding a wild boar, he fell into a hunter's trap and fainted. When he woke up again, he was in a hunter's house. The hunter thought that he would die. After figuring where his house was, the man sent him back to Yongfu village. At that time, 10 days had passed since he was sent to the mountains. Madame Bao gave birth to a boy. Little Qingyuan did not know that he had been sent away by his adoptive parents. He only knew that he was very happy to see his grandfather again. Grandpa was also happy. He hugged him and cried until he almost fainted. He kept smiling and comforted his grandfather that he was fine and not sick. He even met such a cute monkey and ate many fruits that he had never eaten before. He experienced many interesting things. However, his grandfather seemed to be crying even harder. He kept saying that it was his fault, and that he had let him down. Little Qingyuan was at a loss and did not understand what he meant. Later, when no one was around, his adoptive father warned him not to tell anyone about what had happened in the mountains. If anyone asked, they would say that he was out visiting someone else. Little Qingyuan did not understand why, but he was actually very afraid of recalling the miserable days in the mountains, so he agreed and did not tell anyone. However, Madame Bao felt that her dream had come true. Shao Qingyuan was indeed a jinx. Otherwise, why would she really give birth to a son after she sent him away? They didn't want to keep Shao Qingyuan at all, but old Master Li scolded them and warned them that he would cut ties with them if they dared to do such a thing again. The Li family's parents could only keep him, but little Qingyuan's life was even worse. At the age of 8, Madame Bao became pregnant again. With her previous experience, Madame Bao was very afraid of little Qingyuan. However, this time, it was obvious that she could no longer throw him into the mountains. Chapter 577. Leaving the Li family. Madame Bao and Father Li discussed. The two of them were even more ruthless this time. They got the news from somewhere and contacted a gangster in the county. It was said that a group of human traffickers had been wandering around the city during that period of time, and had specially targeted those good-looking little boys. Little Qingyuan was good-looking. At that time, even though he was sallow and thin, his facial features were still very outstanding. This was also the reason why the children of Madame Bao hated him. Madame Bao and the gangster had agreed that she would not take a single cent, as long as the gangster took Shao Qingyuan far away, so that he would never appear in front of them again. Qingyuan was indeed taken away. This time he knew what was going on. He could clearly feel the malice of his adoptive parents, who wanted him dead. Actually, he had no feelings for them. He just couldn't bear to part with his grandfather. If his grandfather knew that something had happened to him, he wouldn't know how sad his grandfather would be. Moreover, these human traffickers were ruthless. He had eavesdropped on what they wanted to do by abducting these children. When one of the kids wanted to escape, his leg was even broken. Little Qingyuan knew that he had to escape. Coincidentally, there was a child who was captured with them. The two of them seemed to know what the other party meant from each other's eyes. While no one was paying attention, the two of them talked and set fire when the human traffickers let down their guard. At that time, they had actually already been brought to Qingyuan Prefecture. To little Qingyuan, who was going on a long trip for the first time, it was already 1,000,000 miles away from Yongfu village. Therefore, after escaping, he was brought to the government office. When the officials said that they wanted to send him back and asked for his home address, little Qingyuan hesitated for a long time. He thought that since his adoptive parents did not want him, he might as well not go back. He was already 8 years old and could support himself. But what about Grandpa? Knowing that he was missing, Grandpa must be very anxious. He might be looking for him everywhere. Little Qingyuan thought about it and decided to go back first. He would let his grandfather know that he was fine. Then he would talk to his grandfather and leave the Li family. When he returned to the Li family, he saw old Master Li, who had broken his leg looking for him. Qingyuan immediately blamed himself, especially when he thought about how he had considered whether he should come back or not. He felt that he was too unfilial. Grandpa Li was very happy to see him and kept comforting him. Grandpa is fine. As long as you're safe and sound, it doesn't matter even if both of my legs are broken. The Li family's parents' faces were very ugly. Moreover, because Madame Bao had given birth to another son, they firmly believed in the idea of little Qingyuan jinxing their family. In the end, little Qingyuan did not leave. He had to take care of his grandfather. Grandpa didn't agree to let him go either. He even begged him not to say anything about being trafficked. Otherwise, if what his adoptive parents had done was exposed, the Li family would be destroyed. Not only did the Li family have the first branch, But they also had the second branch, Grandpa, and other innocent people. Grandpa was about to kneel down in front of him. How could little Qingyuan not agree? However, ever since then, little Qingyuan had been guarding against the Li family's parents. Fortunately, he had grown up and slowly understood many things. When he was 13 years old, Madame Bao was pregnant again. Shao Qingyuan knew that the Li family's parents would not let him off this time. He left the Li family without hesitation. Seeing that his attitude was firm, his grandfather finally stopped persuading him, and even left home with him. The grandfather and grandson lived together. This action embarrassed the Li family, and made them the laughingstock of the entire village. Chapter 578. Stunned sleep talk. The Li family's parents didn't agree at first and even set very harsh conditions. One of them was that they didn't allow Shao Qingyuan to buy or sell farmland in Fengkai County. Shao Qingyuan agreed without hesitation. He had strength and could hunt. In the past few years, he had entered and left the mountains several times. He had even fought with a lone wolf. He had no problem supporting himself and his grandfather. Chen Liang gave Shao Qingyuan and his granddaughter a house at the foot of the mountain. This house was very dilapidated, but they still had to buy it. The two of them were penniless. Where did they get the money? It was only after Shao Qingyuan went up the mountain and caught a wild boar to sell that they finally had a place to live. Although the house was dilapidated and there were few people, it didn't matter. He was full of confidence in his future life. This time, Madame Bao gave birth to another daughter. Madame Bao hated him to death. She felt that it was because Shao Qingyuan was still in the village. He was restraining her. The couple came to the door and hit and scolded Shao Qingyuan. Shao Qingyuan was no longer at the age where they could hit him freely. He would retaliate and push Father Li to the ground on the spot. Father Li was down for a long time and could not get up. Madame Bao scolded him for being unfilial and an ingrate. For the sake of his grandfather, Shao Qingyuan didn't react to the scolding. However, after that day, there were rumors in the village that Shao Qingyuan was a wolf cub. It was said that he had been dirty since he was young. Not only did he steal things, but he also hit his younger siblings. The Li couple portrayed themselves as aggrieved and bullied. When Grandpa Li heard this, he sighed at home and often wiped his tears. It's my fault. I didn't teach them well, and let Qingyuan suffer. Shao Qingyuan didn't feel aggrieved. He was living a very happy life now. Without the Li family's parents' indirect scolding and his siblings' bullying, it was enough for him and his grandfather to be the only ones in the entire family. However, not long after, Grandpa Li fell ill. Shao Qingyuan knew that he was heartbroken. He felt that he was very incompetent to let his children and adoptive grandson fight like fire and water. He blamed himself for being a failure in this life. He had a heartache and caught a cold by chance. Moreover, he was old and fell down immediately. Shao Qingyuan saw that he often talked in his dreams, saying that he did not have much time left, but he could not see his family in harmony. He would probably die with regrets. Shao Qingyuan felt very uncomfortable. Just as he was considering whether to ease his relationship with the Li family's parents and move back to the Li family, so that his grandfather could feel better, he realized that his grandfather's condition had suddenly worsened, and the man's mind was starting to blur. Occasionally, he would even curse himself to the point where he could not even hold the medicine bowl. Shao Qingyuan was very anxious and went to the county city to invite a doctor over. The doctor said that he was poisoned. As for what poison it was, he could not find out. He was afraid that he would have to go to the prefectural city to get a doctor. He could not treat it. Shao Qingyuan was very afraid that his grandfather would die just like that. He had just had the ability to let his grandfather live a good life. How could he accept him leaving? He planned to bring his grandfather to the prefectural city the next day and find the best doctor. He had to treat his grandfather's illness. Shao Qingyuan had even prepared a carriage, but when he went to cover his grandfather with a blanket that night, he heard something that stunned him. Shao Qingyuan, why weren't you the one poisoned? It should have been you. Why didn't you drink that cup of tea? Shao Qingyuan was stunned. He accidentally knocked over a bowl beside him. Grandpa Li was woken up. He didn't know if he was still dreaming or if his reaction was slow after being poisoned, but when he heard Shao Qingyuan's unbelievable question, he blurted out some words. Chapter 579. Cruel truth, Shao Qingyuan would never forget how his grandfather had looked at him with a ferocious and vicious smile back then. His face had been twisted. Yes, I administered the poison. But I was going to give it to you. Why didn't you drink it? Why? Shao Qingyuan thought about it, and remembered that his grandfather had indeed poured him a glass of water that day, saying that he had worked hard, and that his grandfather could not help. Being sick at most, his grandfather could only pour him a glass of water. Shao Qingyuan was about to drink when Li Chuanxiang came to find trouble and pushed Grandpa Li down. Shao Qingyuan quickly helped Grandpa Li into the house to rest. When he came out again, Li Chuanxiang had already run away in fear. As for the glass of water on the table, after the commotion just now, it had all spilled out. More than half of it had spilled on the plate of cut peaches on the table. Shao Qingyuan had specially bought the peaches for his grandfather. Li Chuanxiang had even taken half of them just now. Shao Qingyuan gave the remaining half of the peaches to his grandfather. Anyway, the glass of water was clean, so there was no need to wash the peaches again. Neither of them expected that the peaches had already been poisoned. It was unknown where Grandpa Li found this poison. After taking this poison, one's reaction would be slow and their limbs would be stiff, as if they had a stroke. Shao Qingyuan froze. He didn't understand why his grandfather would give him such poison. Grandpa Li was already awake at this moment. After knowing that he had said something he shouldn't have said in his dream, he didn't panic. Instead, he quickly calmed down. There was no longer any love in his eyes when he looked at Shao Qingyuan, only coldness and disgust. Then Shao Qingyuan heard the truth from him. Why did I feed you poison? Of course, it's to make you wish you were dead. Grandpa Li smiled as he spoke. I didn't pick you up from the mountains at all. Your father and grandmother personally handed you to me. He looked at Shao Qingyuan's stunned expression, and his eyes were filled with joy. When you were born, your mother died, and she died especially tragically. When you were a month old, your biological brother fell ill. 2 months later, your father's business suffered a huge blow. Your grandmother found an expert to read your fortune, and found out that you had a tough life. If you continue to stay at home, your family will be wiped out, and you won't have any descendants. Shao Qingyuan's face turned pale, but he listened without moving. The expert said that if they wanted to change your family's fate, they could only send you away. Not only must they send you away, but they also had to suppress your fate. The more miserable you are, the better. Only then will your family become richer and richer. In the future, they will have many children and grandchildren, and the family will prosper. Therefore, your father personally handed you to me, and instructed me to watch over you. I can't let you die, nor can I let you have a promising future. You can't have friends, leave your hometown, and must be trapped in this small Yongfu village. It's best to be depressed for the rest of your life. Ha ha ha, look, you're so pitiful. Your life is a joke. No one cares about you. Shao Qingyuan only felt depressed and his vision darkened. After a long time, he said with difficulty, Then you were so nice to me. In order to make sure that you can't leave the Li family and Yongfu village, do you know what's the most important thing to restrain a person? Of course, it's to hold his feelings and make him unable to let go. I'm very successful, right? Shao Qingyuan looked at the person in front of him. The person was so unfamiliar that he didn't seem to recognize him. Chapter 580. Looking for biological parents, Shao Qingyuan recalled many things that he had never thought about before. For example, when he arrived at the Li family, although Madame Bao had 2 daughters, she was pregnant with another child. No one knew if it was a boy or a girl. The Li family also had a second and third branch. Why did Grandpa insist on raising him under the door of the vicious eldest son's family? For example, every time he was beaten and scolded, Grandpa would stand in the courtyard and scold the couple. Not only did the second and third branches watch the commotion, but even the neighbors outside saw it as a joke. Therefore, after that, the first branch beat and insulted him even more badly. For example, if there was anything good, his grandfather would never let him eat it in private. He would always take it out openly in front of the other children in the family. Therefore, he became the enemy of all the Li family children. For example, even though his grandfather knew that his adoptive parents did not treat him well, he still used all kinds of excuses to make him stay. So this was the case. At that moment, Shao Qingyuan's heart sank, and the surrounding colors seemed to dim. He heard his drifting voice say, "If that's the case, why are you telling me now?" Ha 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 ha. Old Master Li laughed wildly. He looked at Shao Qingyuan with pity and joy. Because I'm going to die. He knew that he wouldn't be able to live. Before he died, that would be the time for him to truly destroy Shao Qingyuan. It gave him the most fatal blow. What was physical harm? How pitiful would it be when he realized that the only person he trusted in his life, the one he could rely on and hold on to, had never treated him as a human. Therefore the love was fake. All the care was a lie. It was just to drag him down to a deeper hell. His life had always been colorless. What he thought to be love feelings was an act that others put on for him to see. He had always been alone. Shao Qingyuan didn't know how he left home. He went to return the carriage and used the money he planned to treat his grandfather with to go to a restaurant for a meal. He went deep into the mountains and killed 2 wild boars. He lay on the hot ground and looked at the sky. When he came back, his grandfather was dead. Shao Qingyuan dragged him to the Li family and didn't care about him anymore. Everyone was scolding him, saying that he was an ingrate who couldn't be talked sense into. They said that the old man had given him all his feelings when he was alive, but he didn't even send him off. Shao Qingyuan didn't explain anything. He locked the door and left the village. He only returned half a year later. The Li family had raided the house. He went to the Li family and smashed all the pots and pans they had taken from him. He tore down the Li family's courtyard door and beat Father Li up. From then on, the people of Yongfu village avoided him like snakes and scorpions. They hated him for being ruthless and no one interacted with him anymore, except for the Zhang family who lived next door. This was how he had lived for the past 5 years. Until he met Yundong. After saying what had happened over the years, Shao Qingyuan went from uneasiness to calmness. It was as if the harm was no longer important. But he still looked at Yundong nervously. At this moment, Yundong only felt a ball of fire burning crazily in his heart. It was so hot that she could only suppress it desperately to retain a trace of rationality. She wanted to kill everyone in the Li family. What right did they have to bully Shao Qingyuan? She wanted to dig out that disgusting old man from the Li family's grave and whip his corpse. Such a beast should not have died so easily. She wanted to. Her hand was squeezed. Yundong's eyes were slightly red and her voice was a little hoarse. "I'm here. Are you afraid?" he asked cautiously. Yundong did not react for a moment. On the other hand, Dajiang, who was sitting not far away, slapped the table and cursed. "What's there to be afraid of? What jinx? It's all nonsense. Death is just eternal sleep. Your biological father and grandmother actually let a smelly old man torture you for the rest of your life. They're cold-blooded and incompetent. What a bunch of crap." Shao Qingyuan was stunned and looked at Dajiang in surprise. After venting his anger, Dajiang met his gaze and immediately felt a little embarrassed. He quickly changed the topic. "Then have you looked for your biological parents? Perhaps that old man lied to you?" Shao Qingyuan's voice was much calmer this time. "I've looked for them. He didn't lie to me." Chapter 581. His biological parents looked for them? Yundong frowned. Looking at his cold expression, a thought suddenly flashed across her mind. A moment later, she suddenly froze and looked at Shao Qingyuan. "Are you talking about?" She paused and lowered her voice. "The Tao family?" Shao Qingyuan nodded. "Yes, it's the Tao family, a big brewer in Fengkai County." Yundong recalled the disgusted expression he had when they first met Master Tao in the restaurant and the cold expression he had when he met Tao Feng at the bodyguard agency. At that time, she found it strange. Shao Qingyuan should not have any interaction with the Tao family at all. The Tao family did not seem to know him. Why did his emotions change when he saw the Tao family? So that was how it was. It was because he was a member of the Tao family. Shao Qingyuan said, "I went to ask an old man from the Tao family in the past. 20 years ago, the Tao family did have a child. When he was born, Mrs. Tao died in childbirth. The eldest young master of the Tao family, Tao Feng, later fell seriously ill. Then there was a huge problem with the Tao family's business. Not long after, the third young master of the Tao family died. At that time, The Tao family already had 2 young masters. Tao Feng was the eldest young master, and was born by Mrs. Tao. The one who made the bet with Lu Wei was the second young master, by the name of Tao Xing. He was the son of a concubine, and was deeply loved by Master Tao. After Mrs. Tao passed away, this concubine was made a wife in a few years. The people of the Tao family all feel that it's a pity. Few people know what this premature death is about. I found the old man who served old Madame Tao and asked him. Back then, that child was handed over to a stableman of the Tao family. As for the Li family's old man, he had been a stableman in the Tao mansion for 2 years. Lady Tao, who had died in childbirth, was surnamed Shao. When the Tao family's business was in trouble, there was indeed an expert who came to investigate the feng shui of the Tao family. In the past 10 years, old Master Li had visited the Tao family twice. Gu Yundong fell silent when she heard that, but she thought fiercely in her heart. When the Lu family and the Tao family made a bet, she was simply too benevolent to the Tao family. She should have been heavy-handed at that time. What kind of people were they? They listened to a so-called expert, and sent their own flesh and blood away to a stableman. Moreover, they wanted someone to torture him for the rest of his life. They were simply beasts. They were inhuman and unbearable as parents. She was so angry that her entire body was trembling. She recalled the first time she saw Shao Qingyuan. No wonder his eyes were indifferent back then, as if he didn't care about anything. Shao Qingyuan seemed to sense her emotional fluctuations. He squeezed her hand slightly and said, "I'm fine now." With Yundong, those hardships were nothing. Gu Yundong's heart tightened. "I'll avenge you later. By the way, who was the one who came to father and spouted nonsense to sow discord?" She suddenly looked at Gu Dajiang. Gu Dajiang was vexed by the scene of the 2 of them holding hands. When he heard her question, he frowned slightly. Shao Qingyuan didn't think too much about it. It should be eldest Li. He had warned them in the past. The Li family was afraid of his reckless appearance. Therefore, although they would gossip outside for the past few years, they did not dare to really come to him. Everyone lived in peace for a few years. Now that they saw that he was leading a good life and that he was rich and was about to get married and have children, they couldn't stand it anymore and started to ruin it. They probably heard that Gu Dajiang was making things difficult for him, and felt that they finally had a chance to trip him up. Chapter 582. Become hardworking. Shao Qingyuan narrowed his eyes slightly and squeezed her hand. "I'll handle this." Gu Yundong pursed her lips but did not retort, although she really wanted to vent her anger for him personally. However, it was obvious that regarding this matter, Shao Qingyuan could intimidate the Li family even more badly, lest there was a next time. All right, then let them be on tenterhooks for a few more days. After hearing Shao Qingyuan's background, Gu Dajiang sighed in his heart. He stood up. "Rest well. We'll talk about other things after you recover." As he spoke, he stood up and walked out. Forget it, forget it. Since they were already engaged, he would let the young ones talk alone. He left the room with mixed feelings and returned to his room. Shui Rong followed closely behind and saw his master sitting in front of the desk with a frown. After a long time, Gu Dajiang said to him, "Shui Rong, help me bring Tongan over." "Yes, my lord." Not long after, Tongan came in. He looked like he had just returned from the workshop. There seemed to be a sweet smell on his body. Seeing this, Gu Dajiang pushed a cup of tea over. Seeing that he had drunk it, he asked, "Tongan, do you know the Tao family in the county city?" "Master, are you referring to the Tao family, who is in the wine business?" "Yes, tell me about the Tao family." Tongan was a little puzzled. Why did the old master want to learn about the Tao family? However, he did not ask anything and dutifully told his old master what he knew. Of all the information, the most important was the huge bet between the Tao family and the Lu family, as well as the scene where the white sugar made by the young lady shocked everyone, and even sold for a high price. By the way, our shop in the county now, Gus, used to belong to the Tao family. Gu Dajiang really didn't know that there were so many grudges between them. Nor did he know that Yundong had already formed a feud with the second young master of the Tao family. As expected, the Tao family was really despicable. The Lu family had a powerful background. Yundong had told him about this before. Gu Dajiang felt that the Tao family, which could challenge the Lu family, definitely had a backer too. Of course, their backer might not be as strong as the Lu families. However, compared to the Gu family, the Tao family alone was enough to crush them into the soil. If one day, the Tao family suddenly thought of Shao Qingyuan, their son, and found out that not only was he not depressed, but he was also becoming more and more promising. He even had money and a beautiful wife. Wouldn't they think of ways to deal with him? Not only him, but even Gu Dajiang's daughter would become their target. Perhaps they might as well settle the old and new scores together. When Gu Dajiang thought of this, he felt a little anxious. As expected, Yundong was right. Their family didn't lack money now, but they lacked connections and background. No, he had to quickly read. In 2 days, he would go to the academy in the prefectural city to meet Mountain Elder Qi. If he passed the test, he would be able to study in the academy and strive to take the imperial examination as soon as possible. Not to mention how high his ranking was. Even if he was an elementary scholar, he would still have a good title. As Gu Dajiang thought about it, he simply stood up and went to the bookcase to get the books Qin Wenjing had given him. Although he had been very busy for the past 2 days, he had taken the time to read a book. Qin Wenjing had given him books that he had read before. There were many notes on them. To Gu Dajiang, these were very rare and precious things. Tong'an and Shuirong found it strange that their master had suddenly become diligent. However, they did not ask further and quietly left the room. Chapter 583. Going to cause trouble soon. 2 days passed in a flash. The Gu family discovered something strange. It was as if the relationship between young Miss and young Master Shao had suddenly improved by leaps and bounds. When they passed by, they could feel the sweet atmosphere between them. It seemed that although old master had made things difficult for young Master Shao, he was indeed building up the relationship between the two young people. Indeed, he had put in a lot of effort. They had all misunderstood him. It was obvious from the fact that old master didn't chase Shao Qingyuan away to the Shao family to recuperate. He was a stubborn but soft-hearted person. Even Aunt Ke thought so. Gu Dajiang was speechless. He felt bitter and didn't want to speak. Shao Qingyuan's recovery ability was strong. At this moment, he was mostly recovered. He could even practice boxing on the ground energetically. He felt that this illness was worth it. The knot in his heart that had been kept for many years was untied. Yundong seemed to love him more and more. Well, this wasn't an illusion. After he recovered, he dealt with the 2 baskets of herbs he had picked on the mountain. Unfortunately, he still did not find Bai Muzi on this trip up the mountain. Otherwise, that would be the best betrothal gift for the Gu family. Shao Qingyuan sighed in his heart. After packing up the herbs, he washed his hands and asked Mao to gather the other 3. Mao seemed to know what he was going to do and asked excitedly, "Young master, are you going to the Li family to settle scores with them?" Shao Qingyuan rolled up his sleeves. The clothes he was wearing now were still the old clothes from before. He didn't know if it was because his life had been better recently, or maybe because his food had improved, but he seemed to have grown taller and stronger, and his clothes didn't seem to fit him well. However, it was finding trouble with someone. What if there was blood? Yundong had bought all his good new clothes for him. He couldn't dirty them. Hearing Mao's question, he nodded. Mao immediately jumped up and went to pull Go and the other 2 back. When they heard that they were going to the Li family, they all began to rub their fists and turn their heads to look for suitable tools. When they walked out of the Shao family's house, Zhu couldn't help but ask, "Young master, Miss went to the neighboring village today and hasn't returned. Why don't we wait for Miss to come back first?" That's right. Let Miss see our mighty and majestic appearance." "What do you know?" Mao patted Zhu and Shu and said with an unfathomable expression, "This scene will be too cruel. What if it scares her?" Shao Qingyuan glanced at him, and everyone saw him nod in agreement. Shu and the other 2 felt like their jaws were about to drop. Wait, with Miss' personality, would she be afraid? She was not human when she was savage, alright? When they thought of the tragic fate of the old Gu family and Gu Gang's family in Gu village, they would even shiver. However, forget it. Who asked young master to care too much about his image? They would reluctantly cooperate. The weather was very hot, so it was not very late. Occasionally, villagers would carry hoes and baskets back from the fields. Seeing Shao Qingyuan walk towards the Li family expressionlessly, Their hearts couldn't help but skip a beat. It felt like something big was about to happen. Soon the villagers of Yongfu village seemed to have discovered something extraordinary. They quickly spread the news. Shao Qingyuan was about to cause trouble. Chapter 584. Finding the Li family. The Li family was located in the west of Yongfu village. It was a little far from the Gu and Shao families. When Shao Qingyuan and the others arrived, the Li family happened to return from the fields. When he saw the few people suddenly standing outside the door, eldest Li's eyes widened, and he almost screamed. He immediately took 2 steps back. What are you doing here? We agreed in the past that we would mind our own business. Are you going back on your word? Shao Qingyuan glanced at him coldly and did not say anything. He pushed the eldest son of the Li family to the side and kicked open the Li family's courtyard door. He had never been a talkative person, and had always acted directly. Especially when it came to people he hated, he had no patience at all. On the other hand, a mouse sneered at eldest Li. You also said that you should mind your own business. Then what did you say to Master Gu out of the blue? Do you need me to remind you? Eldest Li's face turned pale. Gu Dajiang had indeed said it. He had really told others about what happened that day. The past few days had been peaceful. Eldest Li thought that Gu Dajiang had listened to his provocation, and didn't tell Shao Qingyuan. Unexpectedly, just as he was about to relax, Shao Qingyuan actually brought someone to his door. Ah! A scream came from inside, instantly pulling eldest Li back to his senses. He hurriedly walked in and saw Shao Qingyuan removing the door. Madame Bao was looking at him in horror. Eldest Li ran in quickly. When he thought of how Shao Qingyuan had also broken into their house 5 years ago and smashed the entire Li house into pieces, and how he had almost crippled him, eldest Li instantly felt his legs go weak. He was wrong. After 5 years of peace, he was a little arrogant and couldn't hold it in anymore. Shao Qingyuan didn't say anything. He entered the central room and sneered. Mao and the others immediately ran in, and pulled out Li Debao and Li Erbao, who were hiding in fear. Li Debao was 14 years old. He looked tall, but he did not have much strength. Mao could easily lift him up alone. Li Erbao was 11 years old. When Go pulled him out, he immediately scolded fiercely. You dog, let go of me. Otherwise, I won't be polite. When Madame Bao saw that her 2 precious sons were in the other party's hands, she immediately shouted and pounced at Shao Qingyuan. She was pushed away by Zhu and Shu. Madame Bao sat on the ground. Bandits! Help! Shao Qingyuan, this ingrate, is unfilial. He wants to murder his father and mother. Father, mother? Shao Qingyuan glanced at them, and suddenly punched Li Erbao's stomach. Li Erbao almost spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes began to roll back. Madame Bao's expression changed. Stop. Stop. Don't hit him. 5 years ago, I said that if you come after me again, I'll find trouble with your sons. I thought you should remember it very clearly. Mao grinned. It must be because he's old that his memory is failing him. That's fine. I'll give you another warning today. If you get beaten up too often, you'll remember it, Shu replied. As they spoke, many people had already arrived outside the Li family's door. Some people couldn't stand it anymore and wanted to go over to say a few words, but they were immediately stopped by the people beside them. Don't go. That's Shao Qingyuan. Do you want to be beaten up? But that person seemed to have escaped here. In fact, he did not know Shao Qingyuan's character very well. He only felt that it was not good to barge into someone's house and hit them. Unexpectedly at this moment, someone suddenly ran out of the kitchen with scissors in his hand and rushed towards Shao Qingyuan. Chapter 585. Gu Yundong is here. The person at the door was shocked. He took a closer look and realized that it was the 6-year-old girl from the Li family. Whoa, this young lady had a vicious look on her face at such a young age. If she stabbed the sharp scissors in her hand, wouldn't the victim lose half of his life? However, Shao Qingyuan didn't even look at her before she was grabbed by Shu. He pinched her wrist and turned it gently. As Li Chunyan screamed, he snatched the scissors away. Li Chunyan, who was 6 years old, scolded Shao Qingyuan fiercely. You ingrate. Hurry up and make this dog let go of me. Otherwise, I'll kill you and stab you to death with scissors. Everyone at the door was stunned. Wasn't this a 6-year-old girl? Why was she so vicious with her vulgarities? Li Chunyan hated Shao Qingyuan because she had heard from her parents that she could have been a boy and could have been pampered by her parents. It was all because she had been restrained by Shao Qingyuan that she became the daughter of the family. Although her parents treated her well, she could not compare to her two brothers. At the very least, her two brothers did not have to work. Li Chunyan pushed all the blame to Shao Qingyuan. In the past, she had secretly gone to see him, thinking that she would definitely find an opportunity to teach him a lesson. She did not expect him to come to her house. It was a pity that she did not stab him to death just now. It was too regretful. However, her actions made Mao and the others feel a chill down their spines. Even the other villagers outside the door looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Someone quickly went to call the village chief, and someone went to summon the second and third branches of the Li family next door. The second and third branches had already split up when the Li family's old master passed away. Although their newly built houses were next door, they did not have much interaction with the first branch. It wasn't that they didn't know what the eldest branch had done to Shao Qingyuan, but Shao Qingyuan was not related to them. They didn't have to offend their narrow-minded brother and sister-in-law to help him. Anyway, the old master doted on him. Moreover, in the past, the old man had given him good things alone, and his own grandchildren could not eat them. This made the second and third branches complain. However, it was not to the extent of killing people like the first branch did. At most, they would watch coldly and say some sarcastic words to complain. At this moment, Shao Qingyuan had come to the Li family and caused such a huge commotion. They lived next door, so how could they not know? They just did not want to get involved. When someone came to call them, they reluctantly stepped forward and advised without much sincerity. Qingyuan, no matter what, eldest brother and sister-in-law are your adoptive parents. What are outsiders going to say about you? You'll be scolded for being unfilial. That's right. If the Gu family finds out about this, will Miss Gu still marry you? Let go first. If there's anything, sit down and talk. It was fine if they did not mention Gu Yundong, but when she was mentioned, Shao Qingyuan's eyes turned even colder. He turned his head and punched Li Debao in the stomach. Eldest Li and Madame Bao screamed. Shao Qingyuan, stop. What do you want? We apologize, okay? The second and third branches of the Li family immediately did not dare to speak. Instead, the discussion outside the door kept buzzing. Why do I feel that Shao Qingyuan's actions are a little familiar? That's right. Especially, the more you call your parents, the more miserably you will be beaten. Because I've done it before. A low laugh suddenly sounded behind everyone. Chapter 586. For Gu Yundong's good, everyone turned around and saw Gu Yundong standing behind them with a smile. Someone widened his eyes and called out, Miss Gu. His voice was so loud that it instantly diverted the attention of everyone in the courtyard. Shao Qingyuan looked at her in surprise, but he quickly calmed down. On the other hand, Mao, Go and the others suddenly panicked and whispered, What should we do? Is Miss back? Didn't she go to the neighboring village to look at the orchard? At the very least, she should be back in the afternoon. Why is she so early? What's more, she saw us. We haven't even done anything. What do we do now? Their voices were not loud, but Madame Bao still heard them. She immediately understood that Shao Qingyuan had taken advantage of the fact that Miss Gu was not around to come to her house to lord over them. Therefore, Shao Qingyuan was indeed worried that Miss Gu would see his bad side. At this moment, she felt that she was not afraid even if her son and daughter were in Shao Qingyuan's hands. In front of Gu Yundong, Shao Qingyuan would definitely not dare to attack again. The malice in Madame Bao's heart instantly rose crazily. She suddenly turned her head and said to Gu Yundong, Miss Gu, did you see that? Did you see that? We didn't do anything, but Shao Qingyuan was unwilling to let us off. My two sons are so young, and my daughter is only 6 years old. These men bullied our family of old and weak. Their consciences have been eaten by dogs. As she spoke, she started crying. Shao Qingyuan glanced coldly at the pretentious Madame Bao. When he looked up at Gu Yundong, his gaze softened again. However, Mao was furious and scolded her angrily. What do you mean by you didn't do anything? Your man ran to the Gu family's old master and spoke ill of our young master. He smeared his reputation and tried to sow discord between him and Miss Gu. How can this be called not doing anything? That's right. If it weren't for your dirty tricks, we wouldn't have bothered with you. Also old and weak? There were a total of 3 men, okay? Everyone outside the door started to discuss. Qingyuan also came. He stood at the door and frowned fiercely. He finally squeezed in from the outside and shouted at the people in the courtyard. Why are you making a fuss? Do you have nothing better to do on such a hot day? However, Madame Bao ignored him. Seeing that Shao Qingyuan did not hit anyone after what she had said, she immediately became more confident. She argued with Mao. What do you mean by sowing discord? Did my man say something wrong? Shao Qingyuan is an ingrate to begin with. Look at what he did. Which one of the accusations isn't true? Why don't you ask everyone if my father-in-law dug his heart out for him and treated him better than a biological grandson? In the end, my father-in-law was seriously ill, and this guy didn't take care of him. Even after he died, he was thrown into our house and this guy went back to eat and drink? Eldest Li nodded as well. That's right, that's right. I went to look for Gu Dajiang for the sake of the Gu family. We can't bear to see a good lady like Miss Gu ruined like this. Everyone's discussion became even louder. Eldest Li and his wife were right about those things. Shao Qingyuan really left old Master Li alone. The buzzing sound entered Gu Yundong's ears, but it made her anger rise bit by bit. She tightened her grip and slowly walked into the courtyard. Seeing this, Qinliang immediately said worriedly, Yundong, calm down first. There might be a secret behind this. You know Qingyuan's character. Madame Bao was furious. Qinliang actually protected Shao Qingyuan. She stood up abruptly. Miss Gu, you have no idea how terrifying Shao Qingyuan is. Chapter 587. Terrifying. Thinking. Gu Yundong nodded in agreement. I really don't know how terrifying he is. Madame Bao instantly smiled and looked at Shao Qingyuan maliciously. But then Gu Yundong's voice turned cold. She changed the topic and said sharply, but I do know how scary your Li family is. The smile on Madame Bao's face froze. She turned to look at Gu Yundong in surprise. What do you mean? What do I mean? Gu Yundong sneered. Have you forgotten that when Shao Qingyuan was 5 years old, you threw the weak child into the mountains to feed the wolves just because of a nightmare? You treated human lives like grass and were inhumane. The villagers watching outside the courtyard instantly widened their eyes. The Li family's eldest branch had once thrown the 5-year-old Shao Qingyuan into the mountains to feed the wolves? Even Qinliang looked at Gu Yundong in surprise. Then he suddenly faced Madame Bao. Eldest Li and his wife turned pale, and were about to retort. Unexpectedly, Gu Yundong quickly said, or have you forgotten that when Shao Qingyuan was 8 years old, you colluded with the human traffickers in the county and sold him to them, almost making him unable to come back? Madame Bao retorted almost subconsciously. We didn't take a single cent. It's not considered selling. Gu Yundong laughed. So you admit to colluding with the human traffickers? Only then did Madame Bao realize that she had said something she shouldn't have. There was no chance to deny it anymore. The villagers gasped in unison. They did not know that the Li family had actually done such a thing. Someone could not help but look at the people from the 2nd and 3rd branches and ask, is it true? Eldest Li and his wife really? Of course, the 2nd and 3rd branches knew what had happened back then. They lived in the same house and were not deaf or blind. However, in the face of everyone's questions, they only lowered their heads and stammered, we don't know. How could we know what they did? With that, they rushed back. They did not care if the eldest branch was dead or alive. They were very selfish. However, the villagers had completely believed this. Previously, when they heard that eldest Li had thrown Shao Qingyuan into the mountains, they could still condemn him for his ruthlessness. However, it was none of their business. Other than scolding him ruthlessly, they could not do anything else. But that was not the case for the latter part. Colluding with the human traffickers? The person who was sold back then was Shao Qingyuan. Then, would their own child be sold someday if they had a grudge against elderly? At the thought of this, the villagers were filled with wariness and anger towards the Li family. Coupled with the fact that Li Chunyan, who was only 6 years old, dared to kill someone with a pair of scissors, Was this hereditary? This family was hard-hearted and ruthless. There were some things that couldn't be thought about. The more they thought about it, the more terrifying it became. For example, when Li Debao and Li Erbao played with the others in the village, they would fight with them since they were young. In the past, everyone did not take it seriously, but now that they thought about it, didn't the kids beat others up until they were covered in injuries? That was when they were young. If there was a conflict when they grew up, would they greet others with knives? Also, was Old Master Li really as kind as he looked to Shao Qingyuan? If Old Master Li treated him well, would Shao Qingyuan leave him alone? Someone couldn't help but ask. Then, did Old Master Li know about these things? Chapter 588. Gu Yundong's Brainwashing. That's a good question. Gu Yundong smiled at the man with an unfathomable expression. What do you think? That person looked at Gu Yundong's expression and could not help but swallow his saliva. He nodded almost subconsciously. Yes, the second and third branches of the Li family definitely knew about that, considering the evasive and guilty look in their eyes. As for the old master of the Li family who doted on Shao Qingyuan the most, how could he not know? Eldest Li and his wife had harmed Shao Qingyuan twice, but Old Master Li still let Shao Qingyuan stay in the Li family. When Shao Qingyuan was 13 years old, he had to move away at all costs. Shao Qingyuan was so determined. Could it be that when he was 13 years old, he was persecuted by the Li couple? Some people thought deeply. As soon as the timeline was considered, they would know that every time Madame Bao was about to give birth, they would attack Shao Qingyuan. When you were pregnant, you actually harmed another child. Weren't you afraid of retribution? A soft-hearted woman cursed. Retribution? What retribution? Li Chunyan jumped on her toes and shouted. When I was born, Shao Qingyuan was still in Yongfu village. That's why I became a girl. This ingrate deserves to die. He jinxed us and harmed me. Everyone looked at her in disbelief. Was this what a 6-year-old child should say? What did the Li couple usually teach her? Gu Yundong glanced at Li Chunyan and smiled. You might be mistaken. Not only did Shao Qingyuan not restrain you, but if he hadn't come to your house, would your Li family have Li Debao and Li Erbao? Think about it. Before Shao Qingyuan came, didn't your mother give birth to 3 daughters? But after he came, the children your mother was pregnant with were all boys. Li Debao and Li Erbao were brought over by Shao Qingyuan. As for you, I think Shao Qingyuan cut ties with the Li family and changed his surname to Shao before he was born? You became a daughter because he left. So all of this is your parents' fault. It was your parents who caused all this. Li Chunyan was stunned. She was only 6 years old after all. Previously, when she heard the Li couple repeatedly mention Shao Qingyuan's bad, she felt that it was Shao Qingyuan's fault. But now, Gu Yundong's words seemed to be able to brainwash her. She actually felt that she was right. Not only her, but even the surrounding villagers felt that it made sense. Therefore, the first branch of the Li family indeed suffered retribution. However, eldest Li and Madame Bao did not think so. The thoughts had been deeply rooted in their minds for more than 10 years. How could they be overturned by Gu Yundong's words? If that was the case, wouldn't they have done something wrong all these years? Madame Bao immediately screamed and retorted. No, Shao Qingyuan jinxed us. It's his fault. She suddenly looked at Gu Yundong. Don't spout nonsense here and distort the truth. Am distorting the truth? Gu Yundong raised her eyebrows. Didn't you personally admit that you colluded with the human traffickers just now? Everyone heard it just now, didn't they? The onlookers immediately nodded. That's right, eldest Li. You guys are too ruthless and scary. Village chief, such people should be drowned in a pig cage. They're murderers. I'm afraid when I think about how I stay in the same village with them every day. That's right. I can't even sleep well. If our children are harmed by them when they go out one day, I won't even have a place to cry. Village chief, you can't let them off. One after another, the two of them became the target of public criticism. They were stunned. Chapter 589. Someone is about to die. How did it become like this? The entire village looked at them with disgust, and even wanted to punish them. No. Eldest Li and his wife's heads buzzed, and they lost their rationality. They suddenly looked at Gu Yundong. It's all your fault. It's all your fault. UB*TCH. Alright, if you don't let me have an easy time, don't think about having an easy time either. They could not defeat Shao Qingyuan, but Gu Yundong, a little girl, would not have an easy time. Madame Bao and eldest Li moved almost at the same time. They stood up and rushed towards Gu Yundong. Madame Bao even stretched out her sharp black nails to grab Gu Yundong's face. Eldest Li also grabbed a hoe at the side and smashed it down. Gu Yundong was close to them. When she saw them rushing over, she did not dodge. When the villagers saw this, they all shouted in surprise, "Lady Gu, be careful." Chen Liang was in the courtyard, and was not standing far away. He rushed over without thinking. But he had only taken 2 steps when he saw Gu Yundong twist Madame Bao's arm, and prop her up on his shoulder. She then kicked eldest Li, who had rushed over, and sent him flying. After her feet landed on the ground, she started punching Madame Bao. "You dare to fight me? You're blind and have no memory. Have you forgotten how I dealt with the 4 bastards back then?" Everyone was speechless. They had indeed forgotten about it previously. Now they remembered. As Shao Qingyuan was standing in the central room, and was blocked by Ashu and the others, when he came out he saw eldest Li, who had been kicked away. His eyes suddenly turned cold. He saw that eldest Li was about to stand up and rush towards Gu Yundong again. Shao Qingyuan immediately reached out, grabbed his hair, and slammed him to the ground. Bang! Eldest Li's back was slammed heavily onto the ground, raising a thick layer of dust. He coughed twice. Before he could open his eyes, he was punched hard in the face. "Oh, it hurts. Don't hit me." Shao Qingyuan's fists came one after another. His movements were quick and nimble as they landed on eldest Li. Chen Liang and the villagers were originally focused on Gu Yundong and Madame Bao. They watched as Madame Bao was beaten to the ground by Gu Yundong. Before they could sigh, they were distracted by another shrill cry. In the next moment, everyone widened their eyes and sucked in a cold breath. Everyone only knew that Shao Qingyuan was a wolf cub. He could even kill children and was cruel. However, most of them had heard about it, and only felt that this person's reputation was not good. In any case, they usually stayed away from him. Now, it was the first time they had seen him beat someone up so fiercely. His fists were like stones, and his body emitted a violent and murderous aura. With just a few punches, eldest Li's face was already covered in blood. Everyone was frightened and shuddered. They did not move and did not dare to say a word. Chen Liang was the first to react. He immediately shouted, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and pull him away. Hurry up and pull him away. Someone is going to die." The onlookers outside were suddenly jolted awake, and 3 to 4 burly men instantly squeezed in. However, Shao Qingyuan raised his head and looked at them coldly. The coldness in his eyes made them stop in their tracks. However, Shao Qingyuan's fist did not stop hitting eldest Li. Chen Liang could not get him to stop, so he could only go up himself. "Qingyuan, stop. Calm down first. Let's talk things out." Chapter 590. Too tragic. Gu Yundong was afraid that Shao Qingyuan would accidentally hit him if he went forward like this. She quickly let go of Madame Bao, and went forward to hold Chen Liang back. Chen Liang turned his head and called out to her. "Yundong, quickly make him stop. If someone really dies, Qingyuan will have to go to jail." Gu Yundong knew that Shao Qingyuan had self-control, so she shook her head. "It's fine. No one will die." "You, why are you also?" Chen Liang had a headache. The others did not dare to stop him. Yundong did not want to persuade him, but as the village chief, he could not just watch. As he called the villagers forward, he tried to break free from Gu Yundong's GNP. Seeing this, Amao and the others let go of Li Debao and the other 2, who were already scared silly. They quickly walked over and stopped Chen Liang and the villagers who were moving forward hesitantly. "Uncle Chen, don't be hasty. Don't go forward lest you get hurt." Yes. Uncle Chen, why don't you go over there and sit for a while?" "Sit? Why would he sit? Did they want him to watch the show over there?" Chen Liang glared at them one by one. After all, he was the village chief. Amao and the other 3 did not dare to be impudent. They blocked him weakly and did not dare to use force. However, this was enough. Shao Qingyuan had already knocked out 3 of eldest Li's teeth. Madame Bao stumbled over. When she saw eldest Li's miserable state, Her legs immediately went weak and she fell to the ground. Stop it. Shao Qingyuan, stop. Stop. Boo-hoo. She wanted to stop him, but when she met Shao Qingyuan's bloodshot eyes, she was so frightened that she peed her pants. Li Debao and his brother were trembling. They had never seen Shao Qingyuan like this. Not to mention Li Chunyan. At this moment, she didn't dare to find trouble with him. She only hoped that he wouldn't see her for the rest of his life. She shrank into a corner, and didn't even dare to raise her head. Shao Qingyuan finally stopped before Chenliang arrived. He glanced at Madame Bao. Now, do you remember what I said in the past? Yes, I do. We won't dare to leave. We won't dare to do it again. They were afraid. Shao Qingyuan was too terrifying. He was 100 times more terrifying than the last time he rushed into their house and smashed it. She was sure that if there was a next time, Shao Qingyuan would definitely kill them. If you dare to attack Yundong again, I will take your lives. Shao Qingyuan stood up expressionlessly. Under Madame Bao's crazily nodding gaze, he gently stepped over eldest Li's knee. Ah! Big Li cried out in pain. Finally, he could not hold on anymore and fainted. Shao Qingyuan frowned and looked at the blood on his hand. He came to Gu Yundong's side and asked, "Are we going back?" "Let's go back." Shao Qingyuan led her out. The villagers at the door automatically made way for them and watched silently as they left. There was no one in front of Chenliang to block him. He looked at Shao Qingyuan and Gu Yundong's backs as they left, then at eldest Li, who was lying on the ground unconscious, and Madame Bao, who had almost fainted from crying. He suddenly slapped his thigh. What's going on? However, he could not care less now. Chenliang quickly got someone to carry eldest Li to the doctor. The people from the Li family's second and third branches had never appeared from the beginning to the end. They hid in the house and trembled. Gu Yundong did not pay attention to what happened after that, but Mao and the others told her the news excitedly. Chapter 591. Ending eldest Li's life was indeed not in danger, but he was also not in a good state. 3 of his teeth had been knocked out, and the doctor had found dog teeth to fix on him. The 3 teeth were very expensive, and he had paid more than 10 taels of silver. There would be other expenses in the future. Not to mention the broken leg that Shao Qingyuan had stepped on. Yes, that leg was broken. From then on, eldest Li could only move with a walking stick. He could not do any work in the fields. The Li family's reputation in the village had also been tarnished. Although no one wanted them to be punished, no one was willing to interact with them. Madame Bao went to borrow money from others, but she was almost always blocked out. Li Debao and his siblings did not have a single friend in Yongfu village who was willing to play with them. Because eldest Li was seriously injured and bedridden, Li Debao and his siblings had to work in the fields. They began to complain day by day. As for the 3 married daughters of the Li family, it was said that none of them had come back to visit their parents. In fact, when Madame Bao came to look for them, they directly refused and pretended as if there was no one at home. Gu Yundong felt that this was retribution. Look, the children they raised were all ingrates. This was what it meant to be ingrates. If they had treated Shao Qingyuan well back then, their life would have been so good now. They deserved it. Gu Yundong heaved a sigh of relief. It was a pity that old Li had died early and could not see this scene. Actually, she had really considered whether she should dig him out and whip his corpse. Yundong, do you think I can really pass? When Gu Dajiang entered, he saw his daughter thinking about something with a serious expression. He thought that she was thinking the same thing as him. After all, they had to set off for the prefectural city tomorrow to find the mountain elder of the Tianhai Academy, to settle the matter of enrollment. Gu Yundong suddenly came back to her senses, and immediately nodded with certainty. Of course. Father, didn't you read all the books that Master Qin gave you? Master Qin said that father is talented. He only gave you the recommendation letter, because he felt that you must be capable. My father is the best. After Gu Dajiang received his daughter's affirmation, his face immediately flushed red. When he saw his daughter's adoring gaze, he immediately felt smug. All right, I'll go back and practice my calligraphy. As he spoke, he turned around and left. The corners of Gu Yundong's mouth twitched. Her father's handwriting was actually very good. He had been an accountant for many years. He might not have read enough books, but he had written a lot of words. The next day, the group prepared to head to the prefectural city. Other than accompanying her father to the academy, Gu Yundong also had to visit the shop. Shao Qingyuan felt that they needed protection, so he packed his bags and followed them. Gu Dajiang and Madame Yang couldn't bear to part, so they had to go together. Gu Yunka had already climbed into the carriage. Her soft little face was hidden behind the curtain of the carriage, as if no one could see her, and they could not keep her at home. Aunt Ku was going back to the prefecture capital. Gu Yundong also brought Shuirong and Tong Shuitao along. Shuirong followed beside Gu Dajiang as a page boy. This time, Shao Qingyuan brought Azhu and Ashu along. Last time, he brought Amao along with him. There were a lot of people, so they were divided into 2 carriages. Seeing that there was nothing left, the group set off majestically and left Yongfu village. There were many people standing outside the Gu family's workshop. Someone who was well-informed said with a face full of emotion, "I heard that the boss is going to open a shop in the prefectural city this time. Tell me, how long has it been?" "The boss is actually opening a shop in the prefectural city. It's amazing." Chapter 592. Zhuangzi, a shopkeeper. Last time, the owner said that when she goes to the prefectural city to open a shop, our workshop will recruit more people. Is it going to start when the owner comes back? I'm sure it is. I'll go home today and tell my maternal cousins to be prepared. Yes. This is a rare opportunity. After they recruit someone this time, we don't know when the next time will be. Everyone spoke one after another, and a few of them thought too much. There were more and more people in this workshop. Tongan alone would definitely not be able to manage it. When the time came, the boss would definitely find someone to manage it, even if it was a junior manager. Hence, for the sake of a good impression, everyone worked extra hard these few days. However, Gu Yundong did not know that the long-term workers in her small workshop had started to work hard. She sat in the carriage and held little Yunka in her arms. After the young lady confirmed that she could go to the prefectural city, she was overjoyed. When the carriage reached the county city, Gu Yundong went to Gus first. As soon as they got off the carriage, she heard Zhuangzi's arrogant voice. Yes. You have to wipe it clean over there. Our shop sells food. Cleanliness is the most important. When there are no customers, wash and wipe everything. Be more efficient and diligent. Only then will the customers be in a good mood, right? The corners of Gu Yundong's mouth twitched. She heard Zhuangzi continue. Jinkai, don't blame me for saying too much. I'm doing this for your own good. When I was the shop assistant, this was how I was trained. You'll get used to it. As soon as he finished speaking, he saw Gu Yundong enter. His expression immediately changed and he welcomed her with a smile. Boss, why are you here? Gu Yundong looked at the shop. It was not bad, but Zhuangzi's attitude of becoming the owner was really annoying. Chen Jinkai also stopped what he was doing and came over. He had been working here for a few days, and was slowly familiarizing himself with the work in the shop. He looked very energetic. Gu Yundong took a few more glances at him, and realized that there was no dissatisfaction on his face. He seemed to have calmed down a lot. Not bad. Gu Yundong nodded and asked Zhuangzi, where's Uncle Zheng? He's in the backyard. I'll go get him. After saying that, he ran away. Zheng Gang almost did not care about the matters in the shop these few days, and let Zhuangzi do whatever he wanted. He only gave him a few pointers when necessary. He spent most of his time counting goods in the warehouse at the back, or simply buying a few vegetables to cook himself. A few days passed quickly. When Gu Yundong went to the prefectural city, she naturally had to bring Zheng Gang along. He was familiar with the prefectural city, so she had to bring him along when they decided on the location of the shop. 2 days ago, Gu Yundong had already informed Zheng Gang. He should have packed up at this time. Seeing Zhuangzi run into the backyard, Gu Yundong looked at Chen Jinkai. Brother Chen, are you used to being here? Everything is fine. Gu Yundong raised her eyebrows. I heard Zhuangzi ordering you around even before I came in. He seemed very arrogant. The shop assistant, Jiang Bao, who was sending the guests out of the pharmacy next door, happened to hear this and immediately stopped in his tracks. He had already established a deep friendship with Zhuangzi. Of course he was on his side. Seeing that his boss' future wife was asking the new employee a question in private, He immediately perked up his ears. Alright, he wanted to see what this person would say about Zhuangzi behind Zhuangzi's back. Chapter 593. You're smart. Qingyuan smiled and said nonchalantly. It's quite good. I started as a small shop assistant in town in the past. At that time, the manager was even more impolite to me. Zhuangzi was just a little strict with his words. He didn't hide anything from me. He was telling the truth. In the beginning, he was also prepared to deal with all kinds of difficulties and torture. Moreover, the other party was Zhuangzi. Qingyuan had seen too many people who became conceited after gaining power. For example, Qingyuan's husband, Wu Chong. Last time, he had eyes that could reach the sky when he visited the Qin family. Therefore, he thought that Zhuangzi, who was just a hooligan that had often been humiliated and mocked by him in the past, would definitely not be polite to him. He did not care about these things, but he was afraid that Zhuangzi would not teach him anything, let him do what he should do, or let him understand what he should understand. That was the worst. Unexpectedly, Zhuangzi would indeed mock and ridicule him. He would often bring up the past in a few sentences to attack him. However, Qingyuan was someone who had been in charge before. Some things were not on the surface. Zhuangzi was actually bluffing. The guy did not hesitate to take care of him. If he did not understand, as long as he asked, Zhuangzi would explain everything to him. This surprised Qingyuan and made him feel exceptionally at ease. Although he had only been in the shop for a few days, he felt more comfortable than when he was a small manager in the town workshop. Therefore, he worked harder. Yundong did not expect him to have such a high evaluation of Zhuangzi. It seemed that Qingyuan's decision to work under Zhuangzi was not wrong. Both of them could be trained. Jiang Bao, who was eavesdropping outside the door, secretly sneered. At least you know your place. Then he entered the pharmacy worriedly. When he saw the manager of the pharmacy who was talking to boss Shao, his heart tightened. Zhuangzi had already become a manager. When could he go up? However, on second thought, he felt that it was unrealistic. A pharmacy was different from ordinary shops. As a shopkeeper, not only did he have to manage the shop, but he also had to know medicine. He could only be considered an apprentice now. There were still many things he needed to understand. However, his boss' future wife would go to the prefectural city to open a shop. He guessed that his boss would follow her soon. At that time while Jiang Bao was enjoying himself, Zhuangzi from the shop next door had already brought Zhenggang over. Zhenggang was carrying a bag in his hand. He was wearing clean and decent clothes and looked very energetic. It looked like he was full of enthusiasm for returning to the prefectural city. Boss, I'm done packing. We can leave now. Okay. Yundong nodded and instructed Zhuangzi and Qingyuan to do their best. She saw that Zhuangzi was a little nervous. After all, Zhenggang had really abandoned his job this time. It was normal for him to feel uneasy if he wanted to be independent. However, after such a long period of training, there was definitely no problem. Yundong led Zhenggang out and let him follow Shao Qingyuan, who had also come out of the pharmacy, into another carriage. The two carriages were separated by gender. Yundong, Madame Yang, and the other women sat in one, while Dajiang, Shao Qingyuan, and the other men sat in the other. The father-in-law and son-in-law did not talk much along the way. Now that Zhenggang was here, the atmosphere was finally much more relaxed. Yundong shook her head secretly. Just as she was about to get into the carriage, Zhuangzi, who had sent them out, suddenly spoke. Boss. Yundong paused and turned to look at him. What's wrong? Last time, I've already considered what you asked me to consider last time. Chapter 594. Zhuangzi's decision. Yundong raised her eyebrows. What do you think? Zhuangzi took a deep breath. I want to go to the prefectural city and continue working for shopkeeper Zhang. He raised his head. When he spoke, the expression between his brows was exceptionally firm. It seemed like he had made up his mind. Yundong was not surprised at all. Have you thought it through? Will you regret it? No. Zhuangzi grinned. Although being a shopkeeper has always been my goal, I have a bigger goal now. Yundong was suspicious. Why? Could it be that you want to be the boss now? Zhuangzi clenched his fists. I want to be a shopkeeper in the prefecture capital. Yundong was speechless. It was indeed a bigger goal. She wanted to laugh, but she couldn't. She tried her best to nod with a straight face. All right, it's good that you've thought it through. However, you still have to work hard in the county city for the next 3 months. You're not allowed to slack off. You can go to the prefectural city in 3 months. Oh right, tell your parents about this so that they won't worry. I've told them. Father and mother support me very much. Actually, the reason why Zhuangzi had said that he would consider it was not only because of the rare position of shopkeeper, but also because he was worried about his parents and sister. Dajiang and his wife were weak. Although Zhuangzi expected better from them, he had been protecting them. In the past, when he was a hooligan, he could directly go to people's houses to teach those who bullied his parents a lesson. Later on, he stopped being a hooligan and became a shop assistant. However, he could still go home every 2 to 3 days. He knew the situation at home and could help. If he went to the prefectural city and only returned once every month, he would regret it if anything happened to his parents and he couldn't help. Later, when Dajiang and his wife found out that Yundong wanted him to work in the prefectural city, they tried their best to persuade him to accept. Although he was still an assistant, he would see the world in the prefectural city and would only improve in the future. This was their son's future. How could they stop him? Moreover, ever since they helped the Gu family manage the orchard, be it the villagers or their relatives, nobody mocked them any longer. Everybody wanted them to help put in a few good words in front of the boss, so that they could enter the Gu family's workshop. Only then did Zhuangzi realize that his family's situation had improved a lot. He should have trusted Yundong. With her around, she would not let anyone bully the Shi family. Therefore, Zhuangzi decided to go to the prefectural city to see the world. Moreover, he had also thought about it. When he became the shopkeeper of the prefectural city in the future, he could buy a house in the prefectural city and bring his parents over to enjoy life. His parents had never left Fengkai County in their lives. He had to let them see the prosperity of the prefecture city, right? Zhuangzi knew his parents very well. He knew that although they were very good at planting fruit trees, they were actually not suitable to be managers. In the future, the owner's orchard would only grow bigger and bigger. They would definitely find more capable people to help. As far as he knew, Uncle Zhao was very eye-catching to the boss. Of course, Zhuangzi was happy that Uncle Zhao's family could rise. His son Gosheng was his good friend. If they could get rich, everyone could get rich together. Seeing that he had thought it through, Yundong nodded. That's good. As she spoke, she bade farewell to Zhuangzi, and was helped into the carriage by Tong Shuitao. When the carriage went further and further away, and was almost out of sight, Zhuangzi suddenly turned around and entered the shop. He said to Jinxiu, "You still don't admit that you're stupid. When the boss came just now, why didn't you pour a glass of water? You're really stupid." He was just a shopkeeper for 3 months. No matter what, he had to satisfy himself first. Jinxiu. Chapter 595. Jinxiu restaurant in the prefecture city Yundong. And the others had already left the city gate. Aunt Ke looked at the gradually blurring city wall outside the window, and suddenly felt a little sad. 2 days ago, I thought of letting Sitian follow me to the prefectural city so that we can take care of each other. More importantly, her embroidery skills are good. Those embroidery pieces can't be sold for a high price in this county city. What a shame. She will definitely be able to get a lot of embroidery work when she goes to the prefectural city. It's just that she didn't agree. Yundong thought for a moment. Sitian has been through so much and has always yearned for a more peaceful life. Perhaps she feels that Yongfu village is more comfortable and suitable for her. Aunt Ke gave her a sidelong glance. You're really so stupid. Yundong was dumbfounded. No, did I say anything wrong? She looked at Tong Shuitao, who shook her head, indicating that she did not understand. She looked at Madame Yang again. Madame Yang was even more confused than her. Finally, she looked down at Yunka, who was in her arms. The young lady adjusted to a comfortable position, closed her eyes, and prepared to sleep. Aunt Ke was speechless. Aunt Ke sighed and closed her eyes. She didn't want to talk to her anymore. Forget it, forget it. This was Shun Sitian's own business. She shouldn't get involved. It was just that Shun Sitian and that person would have to work hard now that they met Yundong, who was not smart enough. Gu Yundong would probably not be able to help much. Gu Yunke quickly fell asleep. The few people in the carriage did not speak again. They swayed as the carriage moved towards the prefectural city. It was only in the evening that the carriage arrived at the city gate. The Tianhai prefecture was as lively as ever. However, the guards at the city gate were no longer Nietsong's group. The carriage drove into the prefectural city. Tong Shuetao and the others curiously lifted the curtain of the carriage and looked out. Miss Tianhai prefecture is even more lively than Wanqing prefecture. Of course. Back then, Wanqing prefecture had also experienced a lot of attacks from refugees. In addition, the prefecture magistrate had colluded with the Xian family to take bribes. Naturally, this prosperity could not compare to the Tianhai prefecture. It was a little late, so the group first found an inn and booked a few rooms to stay in. Although Aunt Kes' house was in the prefectural city, she had not been back for a long time. Her house had to be tidied up before she could stay, so she might as well return tomorrow. They put down their luggage and rested for a while before going out for dinner. Coincidentally, the inn they were staying in was diagonally opposite the Jinxiu restaurant that Lu Wei's family had opened in the prefecture capital a few months ago. Moreover, it seemed that the restaurant was very lively and business seemed to be very good. When Gu Yundong entered, he saw the shopkeeper who was quickly calculating the accounts on the abacus. Coincidentally, this shopkeeper was originally the shopkeeper of the restaurant in Fengkai County. He looked up and saw a group of people coming in. When he saw Gu Yundong and Shao Qingyuan, he immediately recognized them. He quickly put down his abacus and walked out from behind the counter. Lady Gu, Master Shao, you're here? Shopkeeper, are there any more private rooms? The shopkeeper laughed. Yes, of course. As soon as she finished speaking, a middle-aged man beside her suddenly glared and asked unhappily, "What's going on? Didn't you say that there are no more private rooms? Why do you have one as soon as they come?" Gu Yundong looked in the direction of the voice. The other party looked angry. Judging from his clothes, he should be the manager of a rich family. There was no telling if he wanted to hold a banquet, or if he was here to reserve a room for his master. However, it was already time to eat. Wouldn't it be a little late to help his master make a reservation? In that case, he was the one who wanted to make a reservation. Chapter 596. Who is Miss Gu? The shopkeeper's attitude was kind as he said to the middle-aged man, "Sir, I'm really sorry. There are indeed no more private rooms in the restaurant. This lady reserved it long ago and even paid a deposit." The middle-aged man snorted coldly. "Are you kidding me? She just asked if you had a private room. If she had reserved it earlier, would she have asked this?" The shopkeeper continued to smile obsequiously. "I'm really not lying to you about this. Miss Gu had already reserved it half a month ago. Look, she was worried that we didn't keep the room for her, so she asked. Otherwise, how would I know her? It's all recorded in our notebook." As he spoke, he took the ledger from the counter and flipped to a certain page. He pointed and said, "Look, it's here, right?" He only gave him a glance and closed it without letting him see the details clearly. Then he called out to the waiter, "Come, bring Miss to the Tranquil Water Pavilion on the second floor." The waiter was stunned. Tranquil Water Pavilion? Wasn't that the private room reserved by the owner of Jinxiu restaurant? He could not help but look at Gu Yundong and the rest. They were unfamiliar, and he had never seen them before. However, he knew that the shopkeeper's instructions definitely meant that this group of people had extraordinary identities. The waiter did not dare to be negligent. He hurriedly led Gu Yundong and the others to the private room upstairs with a smile. Gu Yundong glanced at the middle-aged man before he left. The latter seemed to be angry. However, he roughly knew that he could not offend this Jinxiu restaurant. In the end, he glared fiercely at the shopkeeper and left angrily. The shopkeeper still had a smile on his face as he sent him out. As he apologized, he invited the man to come again next time. He was not affected by the other party's dark expression at all. As Gu Yundong went upstairs, she asked the waiter who led the way, "Do you know that man?" "Oh, that person is a steward of the Zhou family." The waiter seemed to know him. "Last time, he accompanied his master to our restaurant and liked our canned fruits very much. Tonight, he came over to eat by himself. It seems that he wanted to invite a junior steward of the Nie family to a banquet, but he came a little too late. Our restaurant's business is very good, especially that canned food. There are a lot of people eating it, but unfortunately, there's not much. Miss, do you want to try it? I'll send it to you later. Gu Yundong had seen it just now. Although Lu Wei had told her that her family's canned food was in short supply in the prefectural city, she was still a little surprised to see it with her own eyes. Indeed, the market in the prefectural city was huge, and the Nie family's housekeeper. Was it Nie Tsong's family? She glanced at Aunt Ku, who pretended not to know anything. Gu Yundong smiled. As she walked, she asked the waiter, "You remember the steward even though he only came once?" "He miss, you don't say. I don't have any skills, but my memory is not bad." As they spoke, the group of people had already gone upstairs and arrived at the entrance of Tranquil Water Pavilion. This Tranquil Water Pavilion was the largest private room in the entire Jinxiu restaurant. Furthermore, the location was extremely good. It was quiet in the midst of the commotion and had a wide view. Not long after Gu Yundong sat down, the shopkeeper came up. "Miss Gu, what do you want to eat? Just tell me. Young master said that he will pay for you. There's no need to stand on ceremony." Gu Yundong really did not hold back. Lu Wei had gone to her house to freeload on food and classes. Therefore, she ordered the restaurant's signature dish. As for the canned food, she didn't want it. There was a lot of canned food at home and they ate too much. Now, even Yunka was not very hungry. The shopkeeper immediately brought the waiter downstairs to prepare the dishes. As soon as they left, the waiter could not help but ask, "Shopkeeper, who is this Miss Gu?" Chapter 597. Gu Yundong is the god of fortune. The shopkeeper glanced at him. "Do you know who provided the canned food in our restaurant? Didn't you say it was the Gu family's workshop?" The waiter was stunned and his eyes widened. Could it be that Miss Gu? Right now, in the entire prefectural city, only our restaurant has canned food for sale. As you can see, there are many people who eat this. Also, white sugar is a rare thing. Even the few large shops in the prefectural city don't have much stock. However, not only does our restaurant have it, but the purchase price is also the cheapest. These goods are all imported from the Gu family. Do you understand? The waiter nodded hurriedly. She was the god of fortune of their restaurant. This waiter was recruited from the prefectural city. He had never been to Fengkai County and did not know much about certain things. However, he knew very well that this restaurant had just opened in the Tianhai Prefecture not long ago. They were new and their foundation was not stable yet. If they wanted to make a name for themselves in this huge prefectural city, other than the two excellent chefs in their restaurant, they counted on this thing which was rare in the entire prefectural city. Their restaurant alone had a lot of dishes made of white sugar. That was something that other restaurants didn't have. The shopkeeper glanced at him. "All right, quickly go to the kitchen and tell Master Zhao to serve the dishes of the Tranquil Water Pavilion first." "All right." The waiter hurriedly ran to the kitchen. The shopkeeper personally brought in the dishes from Tranquil Water Pavilion. He still had something to say to Gu Yundong. A few days ago, young master sent someone over to say that Miss is coming to this prefectural city to open a shop. When you come to the restaurant, we must treat her well. I thought that you were coming soon. Young master instructed me to show Miss the shops in advance. There are indeed a few that are quite suitable. When are you free? I'll bring you to take a look. It was rare for Gu Yundong to feel that Lu Wei was more reliable. She thought for a moment and said, "Tomorrow. Take brother Shao and uncle Zhang to take a look. I have to go to Tianhai Academy." Shao Qingyuan wanted to accompany them to the Tianhai Academy, but he was sternly rejected by Gu Dajiang. Why would he bring so many people to the academy? He didn't need to embolden himself or fight. It was enough that he had his wife and daughter by his side. He did not need anyone else. Therefore, Shao Qingyuan could only find a suitable shop with Zhang Gang and settle down to open it as soon as possible. The shopkeeper immediately nodded. "Sure, no problem." Gu Yundong recalled that the restaurant seemed to be very busy and said, "How about this? Arrange for a waiter to lead the way for us. You can go ahead and do your work. Don't worry about us." The shopkeeper agreed. It was the end of the month, and he indeed had a lot of things to do. As it happened, Laishi was quite smart. He could just let him go. Thus, early the next morning, Shi changed into clean clothes and reported to Gu Yundong's inn in high spirits. After Shao Qingyuan and Zhang went out, Gu Yundong sent Aunt Ke home and asked Tong Shuitao to help clean the house. Gu Yundong stood and looked at the house that she had lived in for nearly a month. She felt a little emotional. When she first came, she was in tatters. Now she had the ability to buy a house in the prefectural city. She came out of the courtyard and brought a few packets of snacks to the neighbors' houses with Aunt Ke. She wanted to ask if there were any strangers who had come to look for Aunt Ke recently. It had been a while since she asked Qin Wenjung to help her get the portrait of the person she was looking for on the notice wall of the prefectural city. Chapter 598. Tianhai Academy. The neighbor had said that a few unfamiliar people had come to look for Aunt Ke, and even described the appearance of someone who had been there before. After listening carefully, Gu Yundong realized that it did not match eldest aunt's appearance. No one had said anything about eldest aunt and the rest. She was a little disappointed, but that was to be expected. It was unknown where eldest aunt and the others had gone. There was a vast sea of people, and it was too difficult to find them without a target. Gu Yundong returned to the inn before getting into the carriage with her parents and heading to Tianhai Academy. These days, such large academies were mostly located in mountainous forests, but the Tianhai Academy was in Shuangzi Prefecture. The academy was very big. It was located by the lake in the south of Shuangzi Prefecture and was quite far from the downtown area. However, the environment was beautiful, quiet, and the literary atmosphere was strong. There were countless people who studied every year. Gu Yundong sat in the carriage and thought that after her father entered school, it would be best if she could buy a house nearby. It would also be convenient and comfortable to go back and forth. Gu Dajiang sat opposite her with a serious expression. No one knew what he was thinking. Gu Yundong could not help but laugh when she saw his expression. "Father, are you nervous?" Gu Dajiang shook his head. "I'm not nervous. I've read all the books I need to read and understood everything I need to understand. But what?" Gu Dajiang thought for a moment and said, "However, I asked the innkeeper this morning. The innkeeper said that the mountain elder of Tianhai Academy is often not in the academy. I'm worried that we won't be able to meet him." "I don't think so. Teacher Qin has always been considerate. He might have already sent a letter to the mountain elder when he introduced us. Besides, if we can't see him today, we'll see him tomorrow. We still have to stay in the prefectural city for a few more days to open the shop. There's no hurry." Gu Dajiang nodded. "That's true." He stopped thinking about it and simply lifted the curtain to look outside. Just as the carriage passed by the notice wall, he suddenly frowned and called Shui Rong, "Stop the carriage." Gu Yundong found it strange. She followed his gaze and frowned. There were still posters of her aunt and the others on the wall, but after a few months, more than half of the portraits were blocked by other notices, so she could not see her aunt's appearance at all. Gu Yundong frowned, but there was nothing he could do. Qin Wenjung had asked the prefectural city government office for help, but it was impossible for them to guard the notice wall all day and not let others cover it. "Father, let's go to Tianhai Academy first. When we come back, we'll draw a few more and post them. In the future, we'll have a shop in the prefectural city. We'll often get someone to come and take a look. Just don't let others cover it up." When Gu Dajiang saw the portrait, he thought of his eldest sister and younger brother, who had yet to be found. It would be fine if their whereabouts were unknown, but they might even lose their lives. Back then, he should have told eldest sister and the others that they would meet in the Qingyuan Prefecture in the future. However, he had told his underling before. Still, be it Gu Dajiang or Gu Yundong, they had searched Wanqing Prefecture for a period of time, but there was no trace of Gu Xiaoxi. He shook his head. "No, they'll all be safe." The carriage gradually drove away before Gu Dajiang slowly came back to his senses. After a long time, the carriage finally stopped at the entrance of the Tianhai Academy. Gu Dajiang took a deep breath as he looked at the 5-6 pillar branded houses in front of him. His heart was inexplicably filled with emotions. This was the Tianhai Academy. As expected of a 100-year-old academy, just by standing outside this archway and looking up, one could feel the thickness and cultural aura. Chapter 599. Fate Hut. When they walked into the archway, they could see 2 huge stone walls. The walls were engraved with dense names. They were all the names of the students who had become honorable scholars in the past 100 years. At a glance, the names were especially shocking. At this moment, Gu Dajiang finally felt a sense of pride that he was about to enter a famous school that had a history of 100 years. He never thought that one day, he would actually come to such an academy with countless scholars to study. He was about to befriend the future pillars of the country. He was extremely excited. If the headmaster had known in the netherworld, he would definitely be very happy. When Gu Dajiang was successful in his studies, he would definitely bring this honor and personally kowtow, and offer incense to the headmaster to thank him for his careful nurturing back then. "Father, go in." Gu Yundong called him softly. Seeing that he had been standing on the two walls and looking at the names as if he wanted to find the people he had heard of before, she could not help but laugh. "Father's name will appear on this wall in the future." Gu Dajiang was stunned. He turned around and looked at his daughter's sparkling eyes. He couldn't help but laugh. "You sure have confidence in me." "Of course. My father is the best, right?" Gu Dajiang's heart surged. Just for his daughter's words, he had to pass Mountain Elder Qi's assessment and enter Tianhai Academy. He had to participate in the imperial examination and engrave his name on it. He raised his head slightly, turned around, and strode towards the door. The gatekeeper guarding the entrance of the academy had already seen this family, but he did not go forward to ask. In fact, people often came to the Tianhai Academy to admire the names on the stone walls, especially those students who were about to take the examination. It was as if they could pass the exam just by looking at the names. The gatekeeper was already used to it. It was only when Gu Dajiang's family walked up the stairs that he raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Please inform that I'm here to visit Mountain Elder Qi." Mountain Elder Qi? The gatekeeper was stunned when he saw Gu Dajiang take out a visitation card. This was also given by Qin Wenzheng. Even the gatekeeper of the Tianhai Academy was literate. Looking at the contents of the visitation card, he suddenly came to a realization. "So it's Mr. Gu. The Mountain Elder had previously instructed you to welcome you. Please follow me." Gu Yundong and Gu Dajiang looked at each other. Indeed, Qin Wenzheng should have sent a letter to Mountain Elder Qi first. The family followed the gatekeeper into the academy. They went around the wall of shadows in front of the door and faced a square. The gatekeeper led them across the square and saw an ancestral hall. In the ancestral hall, there was a statue of Confucius. It looked very solemn. After passing through the ancestral hall, there was a bridge. Beyond that was the lecture hall. Gu Yundong could vaguely hear the students reading, but the gatekeeper did not lead them to the lecture hall. Instead, she walked around the long corridor to the right. This should be the school dormitory. The surroundings were green and quiet, completely different from the strict atmosphere in the lecture hall. Being in it instantly made one feel good. After that bridge is the Fate Hut where the Mountain Elder lives. This is my stop. Please help yourself. With that he left. Gu Yundong looked at the Fate Hut, which was not far away, and thought to herself, "It's really helping ourselves." Gu Dajiang tidied his clothes before carrying Gu Yunke onto the bridge. Gu Yundong and Madame Yang followed. Shui Rong did not come over and guarded the carriage outside. They had just reached the entrance of the Fate Hut, and before they could say anything, a voice came from inside. "Come in." Chapter 600. Can't he focus on health? Gu Dajiang was stunned. He felt that this voice was a little too young. As expected, there was a man in his 30s sitting inside. However, this man was dressed in a long robe and had a short beard. He looked like a sage. The man glanced at them and smiled. "You're Gu Zicheng, right?" Gu Dajiang's courtesy name was Zicheng, which was given to him by the old elementary scholar before he passed away. It meant that he hoped that he could withstand the unfair tribulations in his life and rise in the future. The man continued, "I am the Mountain Elder of the Tianhai Academy. Come, take a seat first." Gu Dajiang couldn't help but twitch his lips when he saw him trying his best to calm down. He said, "I'm Gu Zicheng. They are my family. Brother, please tell me where the Mountain Elder is." The man frowned. "Didn't I tell you? I am Mountain Elder Qi. What do you have to doubt?" "Brother, you're too young." Mountain Elder Qi was in his 50s. Even though this person had a beard, He didn't look like he had reached that stage, right? The man was a little displeased. I just look young because I usually pay attention to my health. How did it become a reason for you to suspect me? Gu Dajiang thought. If you don't look so nervous, you might be more convincing. It seemed that Mountain Elder Qi was indeed not around. Gu Dajiang did not know where this student came from, but he was actually playing a prank in Mountain Elder's fate hut. Gu Dajiang shook his head. Since Mountain Elder hasn't returned, he'll wait outside. With that, he carried Gu Yunka to the door again. He had just taken a step when he heard a sudden splashing sound behind him, followed by a voice. Wait! 5 or 6 people suddenly came out from behind the screen. All of them were wearing the clothes of the academy students. They were of different ages. The one in front was a 12 or 13-year-old boy. He looked like the leader. He immediately ran to Gu Dajiang and stopped him. Wait, who let you leave? And you are? My surname is Qi. The person you're looking for is my grandfather. The young man raised his chin slightly, and the people behind him immediately surrounded him. Gu Yundong could vaguely hear the whispers between them. I knew it. Brother Kai is too different from the Mountain Elder. He can't fool anyone at all. Not necessarily. If we meet a bookworm, he'll definitely be fooled. But reality has proven that Gu Ziqing is not a bookworm at all. As they spoke, they suddenly felt a strange gaze on them. They immediately looked up and met Gu Yundong's indescribable expression. The students were speechless. Why did she look like she was looking at a fool? It must have been an illusion. The few of them hurriedly stood behind the youth. Qi Ting was Mountain Elder Qi's grandson. He was only 12 years old this year, and was currently studying at Tianhai Academy. He had long known that Gu Dajiang was coming. After all, the other party was introduced by Qin Wenzheng. Qi Ting had heard his grandfather praise Qin Wenzheng since he was young. Although he had never seen him before, it did not stop him from being very unhappy with Qin Wenzheng. Qin Wenzheng was the better child. He was clearly a generation older than Qi Ting, but he still had to be compared to him. Just thinking about it made Qi Ting feel stifled. Therefore, when he heard from his grandfather that Qin Wenzheng had actually strongly recommended someone to come to Tianhai Academy to study, he especially wanted to see who this Gu Dajiang, who was praised by Qin Wenzheng, was. Chapter 601. Test Qi Ting's first thought when he saw Gu Dajiang was, is there something wrong with this person's brain? Why did he bring his entire family with him when he came to study? And he's carrying a daughter in his arms? What Qi Ting didn't know was that if not for Gu Dajiang's strong objection, the people who came today would probably have formed a football team. He sized Gu Dajiang up from head to toe for a while. He didn't expect the little girl in Gu Dajiang's arms to suddenly make a face at him. She rolled her eyes and stuck out her tongue. Coupled with her chubby face, it was simply painful to the eyes. Qi Ting quickly shifted his gaze and raised his chin slightly as he asked, I heard that you were recommended by Qin Wenzheng? Yes. Knowing the other party's identity, Gu Dajiang didn't leave. He took this opportunity to chat and treat it as getting to know his classmates in advance. I heard that you haven't even passed the county examination. You're not even a preparation scholar? Gu Dajiang thought for a moment and said, That's not right. It's not that I haven't passed the county examination, but I haven't participated in it. Why haven't you? You're already so old. Did you never find a chance? Could it be that you've done something in the past and can't participate? Gu Dajiang frowned. Before he could answer, a cold voice came from the door. Qi Ting, don't be rude. Who taught you to be so impolite and aggressive? Hearing the voice, the expressions of Qi Ting and the other students behind him instantly changed, and they all lowered their heads. Gu Dajiang and company turned their heads, and saw an energetic man in his 50s walk in. Immediately after, Qi Ting and the others greeted respectfully, Mountain Elder. So this is Mountain Elder Qi? Gu Dajiang put down the girl in his arms and hurriedly cupped his hands in greeting. Greetings, Mountain Elder Qi. Mountain Elder Qi glared at Qi Ting before saying to Gu Dajiang, Zicheng, there's no need to be so polite. I didn't teach them well, and made a fool of myself. Mountain Elder, you're being too serious. It was just a joke. The Mountain Elder glared at Qi Ting again. The latter suddenly trembled and hurriedly apologized to Gu Dajiang. The other students also apologized one after another. They were very polite. Dajiang naturally wouldn't fuss over it. Seeing that Mountain Elder Qi had already sat down, he took out Qin Wensheng's recommendation letter and introduced his wife and daughter. Mountain Elder Qi opened the recommendation letter and read it. He nodded slightly and said, Wenjeng has already told me about your situation. Although I believe in his judgment, we can't skip the assessment. You know this, right? Yes, I understand. Please give me the question. However, the mountain elder took a sip of tea with an enigmatic smile on his face. Qi Ting was very familiar with this smile. He knew that his grandfather was going to have another bad idea. This was his favorite. Originally, Qi Ting wanted to leave. After all, his grandfather would settle the score later. But now he couldn't bear to. He wanted to see Dajiang make a fool of himself. If he didn't leave, the other students naturally wouldn't leave either. They were still curious about how the mountain elder would test the new student. Indeed, after a while, Mountain Elder Qi put down the teacup in his hand and smiled. Do you think that I'm going to test the contents of the books? Dajiang was stunned. The mountain elder means? No way, he had really read a lot of books. The mountain elder waved his hand. Don't be nervous. It's not a difficult problem. As he spoke, he glanced at Yundong and then at Madame Yang. Then, under Dajiang's puzzled gaze, he slowly said, There are a total of 3 questions. Let's start with the first question. Chapter 602, Deadly Question. If one day, when you become an official in a certain place, a bandit captures your wife and eldest daughter, and uses them to threaten you. The mountain elder's voice was very calm, but when he spoke, everyone's ears could not help but prick up. Even Yundong was the same. He stopped in the middle of his sentence and Qi Ting whispered, My grandfather must be asking if he could protect his country in the face of the threat of the bandits. He should sacrifice his wife and daughter's lives to serve the country. Even those who had been officials had such thoughts. This question was a repeated one without any novelty. But very quickly, the mountain elder changed the topic and asked, And you can only save one person. Are you going to save your wife or your daughter? Everyone was speechless. Qi Ting felt his face hurt a little. Grandfather, your question is abnormal. Yundong sighed secretly. Mountain Elder Qi was trying to stir up trouble. This was like a woman asking a man who should be saved first when his mother and wife fell into the water at the same time. As expected, Mountain Elder Qi had a gloating look in his eyes. He picked up the teacup and took another sip. He smiled and said, Think about it slowly. There's no hurry. Unexpectedly, just as he finished speaking, Dajiang said decisively, There's no need for me to save them. The mountain elder stopped in his tracks. The others looked at him in shock. I didn't expect you to be such a ruthless person. You don't even want the lives of your wife and daughter. Why? Are you going to marry another woman and have children with her? Everyone looked at Madame Yang and Yundong with sympathy. However, Madame Yang looked confused while Yundong looked calm. Dajiang continued, Other than my strength, I can only talk. My daughter Yundong is very skilled. She can save my wife. If I go over, it'll cause trouble for her. Yundong smiled. Yes, that was it. Mountain Elder Qi almost spat out his tea. He looked up at Dajiang and saw that he still looked proud. He was speechless. He looked at Yundong again. This young lattice martial arts were good? Her arms and legs looked like they could be broken with a little force. The others also felt that Dajiang was clearly looking for an excuse. The mountain elder steadied himself and said again, What if your daughter were also helpless and could only wait for you to save her? Dajiang did not blurt out. Instead, he lowered his eyes and thought for a moment before asking seriously, Then how far away are the robbers from me? Qi Ting frowned. What does that have to do with anything? You just have to answer which one to save first. Of course it's related. The situation is different, and the rescue plan is also different. There are ways to attack from afar, and close combat methods. How can they be the same? As long as the method is planned well, both of them can be saved. There's no need to choose at all. Qi Ting was instantly speechless. It seemed like that was indeed the case. The corner of the mountain elder's mouth twitched. Was he trying to avoid the main point? That would depend on whether he was willing or not. He was someone who wanted to cause trouble. How could he let it go just like that? Hence, Mountain Elder Qi said coldly, "You're not far from the bandits. They're only about 20 steps away." "Do the bandits have a sharp weapon?" "They do." "In or out of the city?" "Outside the city." "Are there any woods or ponds nearby?" "No." "Do I have any weapons or ropes or anything that's useful?" Is there no end to this question? Mountain Elder Qi straightened his body slightly. "No, you don't have anything that can be used. The other party has enough men, and you are alone outside the city. They're not far. It's very dry without rain. There's no place to hide in the surrounding. So who do you want to save first?" Chapter 603. The second question. After Mountain Elder Qi finished speaking, he saw Gu Dajiang looking at him with an indescribable expression. He frowned. "Why? Is there another problem?" Gu Dajiang said, "Since the other party has sufficient manpower and am the only one without help, life-saving items, or a place to hide, why did the bandits capture my wife and daughter to threaten me? Wouldn't they just tie me up?" Puffed. Gu Yundong quickly covered her mouth and silently turned her head to look at a painting hanging on the wall not far away. Yes, it was written very boldly. She could not understand it at all, but she had to pretend to be very serious. The others in the Fate Hut were speechless. The mountain elder's tea stuck in his throat. He suddenly turned to look at Gu Yundong and asked with a smile, "Little girl, you don't seem to care who your father saves first. Why don't you tell me who you want to save first if your father and mother are in danger at the same time?" It wasn't over yet? Gu Yundong looked at the constipated mountain elder, who had been choked by Gu Dajiang. She smiled and said, "Grandpa Mountain Elder seems to like asking this question. Why don't you tell me who you will save first if young Master Qi and student Kai fall into the water at the same time?" "I'm the one asking you now. Why are you asking me instead?" Gu Yundong nodded innocently. "That's right. It's Grandpa Mountain Elder who's evaluating my father now. Why are you asking about me? I've never thought of entering Tianhai Academy." Like the father, like the daughter. They had the same eloquence. The mountain elder was a little angry. No wonder Qin Wenjung had written in the letter that he could go ahead with the test, no matter how difficult it was. How could he do the exam? The student asked more questions than the teacher. After that, she even looked at him like he was old and his brain was not working well. It seemed that he would not be able to get an answer to the first question even if he asked again. He would just take it that the man had passed. All right. The first question is considered passed. Let's go to the second question next. Gu Dajiang sat upright and nodded. "Please ask, Mountain Elder." "I won't ask this time. The second question is for you to do something." "What is it?" The mountain elder pointed outside. "I'll give you an hour. Go to the lecture hall and ask each of the 20 students for a piece of calligraphy or painting." "Calligraphy or painting?" "Yes, what's the problem?" Gu Dajiang shook his head. "No problem." Gu Yundong thought for a moment. It was 2 hours. On average, it was 3 minutes for each student. This did not include the time needed to go back and forth. It was indeed quite urgent. The problem was that students were very protective of their calligraphy and paintings these days. It was unlikely that they would casually hand them over to others, let alone a complete stranger. Gu Yundong looked at Mountain Elder Qi, who also looked at her and laughed. "Let's begin now." He gestured at Gu Dajiang. "Yes, sir." Gu Dajiang nodded but did not walk out. Instead, he walked to Gu Yundong's ear and whispered a few words. When Gu Yundong heard this, she nodded with a smile and took out something from her sleeve. In fact, it was taken from the space, but others could not see it. Qi Ting craned his neck to take a look, but Gu Dajiang quickly put it away without letting anyone see it. Then he turned around and cupped his hands at Mountain Elder Qi. "I'll go now. You only have an hour." Mountain Elder Qi reminded him. Chapter 604. Gu Dajiang is finished. Gu Dajiang smiled. That should be enough. Then, under everyone's curious gazes, he strode out of the Fate Hut. His back was tall and straight, and he was not afraid at all. Qi Ting was a little itchy and wanted to know how he could get it. Therefore, he pulled a student beside him and whispered, "Brother Zhua, follow him and see how he does it." All right, I'll go now. Zhuangzi was excited. Clearly, he was also very curious and wanted to see it. While Mountain Elder Qi was not paying attention, he quietly slipped out of the Fate Hut through the side door. Only then did the Mountain Elder look at Yundong. He looked at her curiously. When she first entered, this little girl was submissive and did not have a strong presence. She looked like a little girl who relied on her parents to go out and broaden her horizons and meet her elders. Other than greeting him at the beginning, she stood behind Madame Yang and held her sister's hand without saying anything. Later on, Dajiang said that his daughter was quite skilled, so he paid more attention to this girl. Until she couldn't help but burst out laughing. When she answered his question, she had a calm and composed image without any fear. Her presence was so strong that no one could ignore her. This young lady was quite interesting. He could not help but pour a cup of tea for Yundong and asked, "What did you give your father?" Yundong drank the tea quickly, but she did not answer his question honestly. "Won't Grandpa Mountain Elder know in a while? You're quite tight-lipped." The Mountain Elder leaned forward slightly and took a few more glances. He realized that this young lady was actually very good-looking. Especially, even though she was so young, she actually had an aura that no one dared to underestimate. He turned around and looked at his grandson. The two of them seemed to be about the same age. A smile instantly appeared on the Mountain Elder's face, and he looked like a kind and amiable old man. "Your name is Yundong, right?" "Yes." Yundong's eyebrows twitched. This man looked like an old fox who was scheming against everything. "How old are you?" 15. "Are you engaged?" Yundong was speechless. She glanced at the students standing behind the Mountain Elder and said with a smile, "Grandpa Mountain Elder, it's not good to ask a girl about her engagement in front of outsiders. I'll be shy." The Mountain Elder was stunned. He turned his head and was about to ask the gossipy students to leave quickly when he heard Yundong say, "I'm engaged." Before the Mountain Elder could open his mouth, he froze. "Wait, you just said that you would be shy, but now you're saying that you're engaged. Can your words and actions match?" The Mountain Elder didn't want to speak. He took 2 more sips of water before stopping. Meanwhile, Dajiang had already walked quickly to the lecture hall. Tianhai Academy was huge, and there were several lecture halls. Coincidentally, it was the time for the students to rest after class. However, there were still many people sitting in the classroom and studying quietly. There was not much noise in the entire classroom. Dajiang skipped such lecture halls. He was looking for places where there weren't many people in the classroom, and the students gathered in groups of 2 or 3 to talk or discuss. It was not until he found the 3rd room that his eyes lit up and he strode in. Zhuangzi, who was following behind, looked up. Oh, this man had chosen the most difficult place. He was finished. He immediately leaned against the wall outside the lecture hall and waited to watch the commotion. Chapter 605. Stallion painting. There were always students in every academy who didn't love to study but had no choice but to come to class. For example, the lecture hall that Dajiang had entered. Seeing a stranger, the students in the lecture hall looked up in surprise and frowned at him. Dajiang took out the paper he had just taken from Yundong from his sleeve and carefully unfolded the paper. Then he raised it for everyone to see. The students in the lecture hall were stunned, but they still subconsciously looked at the picture. There were 2 horses drawn on the map. 2 horses that were running wildly and full of fighting spirit. The horses were drawn vividly. Not only were they realistic, but they also gave off the feeling of metal and war. One could not help but feel excited when they saw them. It was just like how men nowadays treat cars as their wives. Those days, horses were men's favorite, even for these students who studied in school all day and occasionally learned how to ride horses and shoot arrows. The moment they saw the picture of the horses, their gaze was fixed on it. 2 people could not help but come forward. When the others saw this, regardless of whether they were interested or not, they would follow. This was enough for Dajiang. "Your picture of horses looks pretty good. Did you draw it?" someone asked. Dajiang shook his head. "It was drawn by a skilled artist." "Skilled artist?" A student sneered. To say that the artist was skilled in the Tianhai Academy, which was filled with talents. Was he joking? However, very quickly, someone realized that this painting was really different. The layman only looked at the surface. As long as it was good-looking, it was fine. The expert looked at the technique. Gradually, some students came closer to look at the composition of the horses, and some students who liked painting and calligraphy slowly became excited. This is a charcoal painting that has become popular recently, but this is the first time I've seen such a delicate and smooth painting. Look at these lines. They're fine and powerful, and they're dyed layer by layer from shallow to deep. Moreover, the effect of light and dark has a strong conflict, making the two horses look instantly tall and mighty, making people feel a terrifying pressure. It's as if the horses are galloping towards you, and they're about to appear. Good, this is simply too wonderful. People without skills can't draw such a painting at all. That's right. This painting is the best charcoal painting I've ever seen. Is that so? There were also students who were not very talented in painting. Hearing this, they asked, better than our academy's Master Xia? Although Master Xia has very high attainments in painting and calligraphy, he has only just begun to study charcoal painting after all. It does feel a little lacking. Last time, I saw Master Xia throwing paper all over the ground. He seemed to be very troubled too. Dajiang remained silent as he watched them discuss. After a while, someone finally came out and asked him, "Brother, you said this was the work by a skilled painter. I wonder where that painter is. Can you introduce him?" Dajiang shook his head. That painter keeps a low profile, so it's not convenient to meet them. However, if everyone present wants to improve your painting skills, there's a way. What is it? Someone immediately said anxiously, "I've drawn many charcoal drawings like this, but it's always not smooth enough. I don't know what's wrong. Tell me, how can I improve it?" There were also people who expressed their doubts. "Brother, aren't you being too confident? Everyone encounters different problems. You only have one method, and not everyone can use it." Chapter 606. Completed. Dajiang placed the painting in his hand on the podium, and let the others continue watching. Then, he faced the student who had raised the question and said, "You're right. Everyone encounters different problems. Therefore, if there's a brother who has drawn with charcoal and feels that there's anything he's not satisfied with, and he needs someone to help him take a look, he can bring the painting over. I'll personally show it to that artist." Everyone was stunned. Dajiang continued, "After the artist finishes reading it, they will naturally write down what you should pay attention to. Everyone here is a learned person. I believe that as long as you're given some pointers, you will definitely be enlightened. Your painting skills will more or less improve." Everyone looked at each other. That was indeed the case. Whether it was learning or painting, there were times when they lacked a little enlightenment. They were very tempted, so Dajiang continued, "If everyone is interested, you can give the painting to me now. I'm Zicheng, about to become a student of Tianhai Academy. I want to destroy my future and deceive everyone. I promise to return the painting before school ends today. Of course, if everyone doesn't believe me, you can ask student Zhuangzi, who is standing at the door." Zhuangzi, who was leaning against the door listening to the commotion and marveling at Dajiang's wit, was tempted to see the painting with his own eyes. He was so shocked that he stood up straight. Two students immediately came out of the lecture hall. Seeing that he was really there, they immediately surrounded him and asked him if it was true. Zhuangzi was speechless. How did he become Dajiang's guarantor? No, he thought that his whereabouts were very secretive. How did Dajiang know that he was outside? Furthermore, he even knows my name? Is Dajiang that smart? Because he was too shocked, Zhuangzi did not have time to refute at all. He only nodded subconsciously. Zhuangzi was relatively close to the mountain elder's grandson, Qi Ting. Most of the students recognized him. With him as a witness, Dajiang's words became much more believable. Therefore, someone quickly took out their painting and handed it to Dajiang. With the first one, there would be a second one. This kind of thing that was helpful to their painting skills was rare. Even students who did not have a deep understanding of painting would not let go of such an opportunity. When Dajiang saw this, he hurriedly said, "The artist only has limited time, so they can only accept 20 paintings. It's not appropriate to accept too many." "Only 20 paintings?" As soon as he said this, The other students who were still hesitating did not dare to delay anymore, and quickly opened their cases. There were also paintings left at home or in the schoolhouse. It would definitely be too late to get them now. So someone went to the next lecture hall and told his close classmates about it. Gradually, the students from the other lecture halls came over. In just a short while, the 20 works requested by Mountain Elder Qi had been collected. Dajiang was a man of his word. He decisively stopped when he received 20 paintings. He gathered the paintings and left. Some students wanted him to make an exception, but Dajiang shook his head and said solemnly, "Painting and calligraphy should be slowly appreciated. If there are too many of them and the artist doesn't have much time, won't they be irresponsible if they look at them one by one quickly? Then they will disappoint everyone's trust." He was right. Although everyone was disappointed, they could only nod and let Dajiang leave. They only repeatedly reminded him, "You have to bring the paintings back before school ends." "Don't worry." Dajiang nodded solemnly. Chapter 607. You gave it to him? Zhuangzi, who was outside the door, calculated that only half of the time had passed. Wasn't this speed a little too fast? Was Dajiang the devil? No wonder Master Qin, who made Qi Ting hate him so much, would personally introduce him to Mountain Elder Qi. Zhuangzi shook his head and hurriedly ran towards the Fate Hut. He ran fast, and when he arrived, he was panting and covered in sweat. The student who was waiting for him at the door was a little surprised. "Why are you back so quickly? How is it? Can Gu Ziqing do it?" Zhuangzi took 2 deep breaths before swallowing his dry throat and nodding. "He did it. He's on his way back now." That person was stunned and exclaimed, "He did it? In such a short period of time?" Everyone in the Fate Hut heard it. Mountain Elder Qi immediately let Zhuangzi in. Qi Ting couldn't wait. "How did he do it? Tell me." It was Mountain Elder Qi who poured him a glass of water first and let him drink it. "Take your time." After he went to the lecture hall, he took out a painting. Zhuangzi recounted everything that Dajiang had done along the way. He spoke vividly and occasionally with body language. Perhaps because he was too shocked by Dajiang's actions, he couldn't help but exaggerate. Hence Dajiang, who was presented to everyone, was simply like a genius. With just a few words, he could settle the matter that everyone felt was extremely difficult. Qi Ting and the others really didn't expect him to have such a move. After hearing this, they couldn't help but fall silent. They had also thought about what they would do if they were in his shoes. Their first thought was to ask them one by one and persuade them. However, this method took time and the success rate was not high. Dajiang took another path. He threw out the bait and waited for them to deliver themselves to him without any effort. Everyone exclaimed. At this moment, they had a whole new level of respect for Dajiang. Only Mountain Elder Qi seemed to be deep in thought. After a while, he looked at Yundong and said with a smile, "So the thing you secretly gave your father previously was that steed painting?" "Yes." This time, Yundong's answer was very straightforward. "Who drew that picture? Qingyuan?" As soon as the Mountain Elder finished speaking, he heard Qi Ting say, "Qingyuan drew it? Then I have to see how outstanding it is." After saying that, he looked at Zhuangzi. "Have you seen it before?" Zhuangzi looked bitter. "I didn't go in." Yundong actually wanted to proudly announce that she had drawn it, but she could not get a word in. Now that conditions allowed it, painting was her hobby. Naturally, Yundong could not bear to leave it behind. When she was free, she would pick up a pen and paper to write and draw to adjust her mood. She often had the illusion that she was still deep in the apocalypse. It was only when she picked up the charcoal pen that the comfortable feeling seemed real. She had drawn many things, including flowers, trees, stone mills, fruits, and vegetables. She would draw anything she could see. Now her skills were getting better and better. She had drawn the picture of the horses not long ago. After drawing it, she placed it in her space. Previously, her father had asked her if she had any paintings in the carriage. He wanted to borrow them. Yundong took out the painting on the spot and said that she happened to have it with her, so she handed it to him. As she was thinking, steady footsteps came from outside the door. Chapter 608. The third question. Dajiang returned with the 20-odd paintings. As soon as he entered, he said to Mountain Elder Qi, I didn't disappoint you. I've already brought back all the paintings. Mountain Elder Qi was speechless. He already knew the process. The completion rate of the matter was far beyond his expectations. He asked Gu Dajiang to put all 20 paintings on the table, and looked at them one by one. There was indeed no problem. Finally, Mountain Elder Qi's gaze landed on the horse painting in Gu Dajiang's hand. The others did the same, but Mountain Elder Qi didn't say anything, so they could only wait. However, Mountain Elder Qi quickly retracted his gaze and asked him curiously, "You used this painting to attract other students. If you didn't have this painting on hand, how could you take back these 20 paintings?" Gu Dajiang said, "Then I can only ask other students for them. There are some students in the academy who don't have good family backgrounds. They sell paintings or help others write letters to support themselves financially. There should be more than one who wants to reduce the burden. As long as I find one, that student will definitely be able to help me find the other 19. Although there were students in the academy who spent money like water and cared about their reputation despite their family's difficulties, there were definitely students who wanted to reduce their family's burden and rely on themselves. Naturally, there were also such students who formed groups. Gu Dajiang actually empathized with such people, so he could tell at a glance. As long as he secretly negotiated with them, he believed that it wouldn't be long before he could complete the mission. The mountain elder raised his eyebrows. It made sense. What if you're penniless and don't have the ability to buy their paintings? Gu Dajiang wasn't afraid. Then I'd tell them that I know someone who will buy their paintings and I can still take back these 20 paintings. Even if these students didn't believe him, it was fine. There was still Zhuangzi, right? This guy could still vouch for him. Mountain Elder Qi laughed out loud and looked at Gu Dajiang with even more satisfaction. As expected of someone introduced by Qingyuan. His thoughts were novel and not pedantic. He was flexible and would not pretend to be noble. Very good. It was the same for the first question. He knew to avoid the difficult matter and find a breakthrough elsewhere. He would not be so stubborn as to think of an answer. If he offended his wife and daughter, he would end up in a situation where his family was at odds. Still, after the mountain elder finished laughing, a malicious expression suddenly appeared on his face. Yundong's mouth twitched. Grandpa Mountain Elder, you should practice your facial management. In the past, when you were an official, did you often suffer because others saw your expression? Was that why you resigned early and came back to teach? The mountain elder said. Regarding the second question, you have indeed passed. However, although you have brought back these paintings, you have also promised those students that before the school ends, you will get the artist to point out the shortcomings in the paintings. Now that it's almost noon, it's too late for you to give the paintings to the artist before taking them back. Besides, don't forget that I still have a third question waiting for you. He knocked on the table with a smile and glanced at the paintings on the table. Even if it's an expedient, you can't go back on your word to others. If you enter school in the future, you won't have the face to talk to these classmates, right? Mountain Elder Qi felt that the artist Gu Dajiang was talking about was most likely Qingyuan. Unless Qingyuan was in the prefectural city, he would never be able to bring the paintings back to the academy before the school ended. But Qingyuan was in Fengkai County. Chapter 609. Should I remind Gu Yundong? Gu Dajiang wasn't nervous. It's indeed almost noon. Please give me the third question. The mountain elder was stunned. Did she not understand what he said just now? That shouldn't be the case. Gu Dajiang was such a smart person. It was only when he saw Gu Yundong stand up and carry the 20 paintings back that he was slightly stunned and came to a realization. That's right, Gu Dajiang still had his sharp-tongued daughter. Gu Dajiang could pass the third test in peace while his daughter took the paintings away and get help. Alright, then I'll talk about the third one. Mountain Elder Qi said. The third one isn't difficult. You have to go to a lecture hall that's in the middle of a lesson. After you're done listening, write an essay for me. The third was the true test of Gu Dajiang's knowledge. It was really not difficult in a way. Most people who had read books knew how to write an article. Moreover, this article did not have any restrictions. You could cut in from any angle and do whatever you wanted. However, it was difficult in another way. After all, the person reviewing the article was Mountain Elder Qi, As the mountain elder of an academy and an official for many years, it was said that he had participated in the imperial examination in the past. To Mountain Elder Qi, who had read too many good essays, an essay that was too mediocre and not eye-catching would disappoint him. Furthermore, although Gu Dajiang had read many books and had written some articles in private, no one helped him review them. There was no interaction. It was a weakness. Gu Dajiang felt that this was the true test for him. The mountain elder looked at him and frowned slightly. He asked why. Is there a problem? No. He shook his head and said, it's just that my wife and daughter ate breakfast early. When I finish writing the essay after class, it would be past noon. I don't want them to wait with me on an empty stomach. Mountain Elder Qi nodded, but he thought to himself that Gu Dajiang was probably finding an excuse for his daughter to leave the academy with the paintings, right? However, he did not want to do as Gu Dajiang wished. It doesn't matter. The academy has a canteen. I'll get someone to bring you some food. The weather is hot now. It's inconvenient for them go out in the afternoon. You don't want them to be tired, right? In that case, thank you, Mountain Elder. Gu Dajiang bowed deeply. Then I'll go to the lecture hall. The Mountain Elder was stunned. He agreed just like that? Shouldn't he persevere a little? He suddenly felt like he was punching cotton. He clearly had a bad idea in his heart, but the other party did not seem to take the blow as he had imagined. It was simply too bad. Gu Dajiang turned around and left. When Qi Ting saw this, he thought for a moment and quickly approached a student beside him. Bring him to the Enlightenment Lecture Hall. The difficulty had increased. He wanted to see how Gu Dajiang would pass. The Tianhai Academy was also divided into several parts. The Enlightenment Lecture Hall was filled with young children, so the content of the teacher's lectures was naturally not deep. Gu Dajiang could obtain very little knowledge. Let's see how good an article he can write this time. The student nodded and quickly followed. Mountain Elder Qi saw it, but did not stop him. In the face of a challenge, he would always encounter all kinds of accidents. It was also a good opportunity for Mountain Elder Qi to see how he could adapt to the situation. So he tacitly agreed. What he cared about now was something else. It had been so long. Why didn't the Gu family's girl say that she was leaving? Should he remind her that time was tight? Chapter 610. Gu Yundong's painting. Mountain Elder Qi cleared his throat, glanced at Gu Yundong, and said, Miss Gu, the school ends at 1700 hours in the Tianhai Academy. His words were very obscure. Gu Yundong nodded. Yes. Before I came here, my father had also asked around. School is a little late in the summer, and it will be an hour earlier in the winter. The mountain elder was speechless. Why didn't she understand? Where did her intelligence go? Or was he being too vague? He coughed lightly and gave up on himself. He said openly, Miss Gu, time is quite tight. You have to return those paintings before the school ends. Shouldn't you make some moves? Qj Ting scoffed. His grandfather was clearly going easy on him. But in the next moment, Gu Yundong nodded. Grandpa Mountain Elder is right. It's better to return them as soon as possible. After saying that, she sat in front of the table, spread out the drawing paper, and read it carefully and seriously. The mountain elder was speechless. Everyone was speechless. What are you looking at? You don't understand anything about art, and you still act like an unfathomable expert. It doesn't even look like you're pretending, okay? After reading the first picture, Gu Yundong roughly knew what the other party's focus was, which aspect was very weak, and what he had neglected. There were many points to mention. She looked around and asked Mountain Elder Qi, Grandpa Mountain Elder, can I use a pen? I can, but you. Gu Yundong did not stand on ceremony. Mountain Elder Qi also had charcoal pens. Gu Yundong was more comfortable with this. He took one and started writing on the drawing paper. The mountain elder was stunned. He suddenly stood up and walked to her. What are you doing? Gu Yundong looked up and said matter-of-factly, Of course I'm pointing out what's lacking and helping this student improve his painting skills. Didn't my father say so? No, what nonsense are you writing? Qi Ting and the others quickly walked forward and said angrily, Your father asked you to let the painter who drew the painting of horses point it out, not for you to mess around here. Do you know how much the students of our academy cherish these paintings? How can they let you paint randomly on them? Do you know that you've ruined their hard work? The others nodded one after another, as if they could empathize with someone who did not take their intentions seriously. Miss Gu, your father promised to return the painting before the school ends. We understand that he doesn't want to go back on his word and deceive the students, but we can't let you fool us, right? Miss Gu, if your father really can't do it, it's not a big deal to return the paintings and apologize. That's right. It's too disrespectful to write on someone else's painting so casually. The mountain elder frowned and turned his head to glare at his grandson and the other students. All right, what are you all talking about? Miss Gu hasn't said a word and you've already lambasting him. All of you aren't young anymore. What if you scare her? As soon as he spoke, the others immediately lowered their heads and did not dare to make a sound. Weren't they too anxious and afraid that she would destroy someone else's things? They didn't really want to scare her. Gu Yundong was helpless. She unfolded the painting of horses that her father had left behind before he left. I drew this painting. The artist that my father mentioned is me. Mountain Elder Qi. The others. What are you talking about? The wind's too strong. I don't think I heard you properly. Chapter 6:11. Cute students. The mountain elder could not help but look at Gu Yundong. Then he lowered his head and looked at the picture of horses on the table. Then he continued to look at Gu Yundong and then at the picture of horses. He repeated this several times, but he was still in a daze. The others did the same thing. Gu Yundong wanted to laugh. Thinking about it, it made sense. If it were her, she wouldn't believe it either. After a while, someone finally asked with difficulty, You're not bluffing, right? Gu Yundong simply took out a piece of drawing paper from the side and twirled the charcoal pen in her hand. Then she placed it on the paper and started drawing. Her movements were very fast. It was obvious that she was familiar with it, as if she had practiced it thousands of times. Not long after, a simple version of Mountain Elder Qi appeared on the paper. It looked very smooth. The picture of horses was really drawn by me. Gu Yundong emphasized it again and said helplessly, So my father did not lie to anyone. Now can I write on the painting? Everyone was stunned by Gu Yundong's actions. When they heard her question, they subconsciously nodded. Gu Yundong ignored them and lowered her head to look at the second painting. After she finished writing her opinion, a student suddenly jumped in front of Gu Yundong. His face was red and he said excitedly, You actually drew the picture of horses. Miss Gu, your drawing skills are too good. Actually, I'm very interested in charcoal drawing. I have many works in my dormitory. Can you help me take a look? Please visit Site Histories. C0M, maybe Y0 you will Eng0 Y the captivating SH0 RTSD0 rise. And me. I've been thinking about it for days. Miss, please wait a moment. I'll go to the schoolhouse to get the painting. Gu Yundong raised her head and looked at these people in surprise. These days, most of the students were aloof, especially in terms of learning. They might not look down on women, but they were definitely unwilling to consult a girl who was younger than them. It would make them feel embarrassed. Qingyuan was an exception. From his attitude towards his wife, it could be seen that he respected women and would not underestimate them. But Gu Yundong suddenly felt that it was the right choice for her father to come to Tianhai Academy to study. Of course, Gu Yundong did not mind interacting more with such a group of adorable students who were modestly asking questions and focused on improving their knowledge. However, the mountain elder was unhappy. He coughed lightly and said with a frown, All right. All of you are squeezing in front of the girl. What's wrong with you? Where are the rules and etiquette you learned? Also, how long have you been in the Fate Hut? It's time for class. Aren't you going back? Everyone shrunk their necks from the scolding. They wanted to say something, but they did not dare to. In the end, they could only turn their heads to look at Qi Ting. Qi Ting himself wanted to squeeze forward, but unfortunately, he was young and short. He was actually blocked behind. At this moment he was depressed. Therefore, he completely ignored the gazes of the others. The mountain elder glared at everyone again. Only then did these people lower their heads and leave dejectedly. Qi Ting did not leave. The mountain elder frowned and looked at him majestically. Why? Are you still not leaving? Grandfather, there are important guests at home. As the host, how can I not stay and entertain them? Qi Ting said righteously. Moreover, it's almost noon. I'll go to the canteen to get food for them. With that, he ran to the reception hall to get the food box and left. As soon as he left, Mountain Elder Qi pursed his lips. He immediately moved a chair and sat beside Gu Yundong calmly. Chapter 6:12. I'm guiding you, Gu Yundong. Where were the rules and etiquette? The Mountain Elder said in all seriousness. I'll just sit at the side. You do your thing and I'll watch mine. Don't worry, I won't make a sound to disturb you. Gu Yundong's hand that was holding the charcoal pen was a little stiff. Mountain Elder Qi, you've been an official for many years and have an imposing aura. You're already disturbing me by sitting beside me, okay? Hurry up. You have a total of 20 paintings. Mountain Elder Qi still had a serious expression. I'll take the opportunity to see how your handwriting is and give you some pointers. Gu Yundong was speechless. This was the first time she had seen someone stealing skills from others in such a refreshing and refined manner. Why? Do you think I can't guide you? Seeing that she did not move for a long time, Mountain Elder Qi became a little anxious. He immediately said with a straight face, Do you know how many people in Tianhai Academy want to receive half a word of advice from me? Gu Yundong smiled. No, it's my honor to have the Mountain Elder's guidance. Yes. Mountain Elder Qi nodded in satisfaction. Gu Yundong secretly heaved a sigh of relief and lowered her head to look at the paintings. Her speed was not considered fast, but her serious and responsible attitude made Mountain Elder Qi nod repeatedly. After reviewing one, Gu Yundong carefully placed it aside. Then Mountain Elder Qi took it over, as if he was really looking at her handwriting. As he read, he said, Your handwriting is not bad, but the style is a little strange. That was all he said. Then he began to focus on the painting and read Gu Yundong's comments. Gu Yundong's mouth twitched. Forget it, as long as he was happy. She continued to flip through the next painting. Just as she was about to write, hurried footsteps suddenly came from outside the door. Gu Yundong was stunned for a moment when the Mountain Elder beside her suddenly stood up. He was a few steps away from the desk, as if it had been someone else who was sitting at the side and looking at the painting. He had just taken 2 steps when Qi Ting came in with a lunchbox. The Mountain Elder nodded at him. All right, since the food has been brought back, bring Madame Gu and second Miss Gu to the reception hall to eat first. Remember to entertain them well. Qi Ting's hand, which was about to put down the lunchbox, paused. Me? Of course. Aren't you the master? Qi Ting glanced at little Yunka and Madame Yang, who were playing with the puzzle pieces not far away. This puzzle was given to them by Mountain Elder Qi. It was a good toy for children. He glanced at Mountain Elder Qi and Gu Yundong, who did not seem to intend to eat now. He could only accept his fate and call the 2 of them to the reception hall at the back. The little girl looked at Gu Yundong, who nodded. Go ahead. Eldest sister will wait for father to come back before having lunch. You and mother can go eat first. She was indeed not hungry. It was not time for lunch yet. But Gu Yunka was different. The young lady did not eat much in the morning. Usually, when she was at home, they would prepare some snacks or fruits. When she was hungry, she could fill her stomach. However, she was coming to Tianhai Academy today. The young lady had heard from her brother that she could not eat casually in school, so she did not bring any snacks. In fact, she was already a little hungry. With Gu Yundong's approval, she put down the puzzle and obediently held Madame Yang's hand as she followed behind Qi Ting. Gu Yundong continued to examine the paintings on the table. Qi Ting led them to wash their hands first. Madame Yang and Gu Yunka were quiet. After washing their hands, Madame Yang wiped her hands with a handkerchief. Qi Ting watched from the side. He was about to say that a brat was a brat, who needed someone else to wipe her hands. Who knew that in the next moment, his eyes suddenly widened. Chapter 6:13. Are you a bear? Qi Ting looked at Madame Yang in a daze. Seeing that her gaze was honest and not at all ashamed of being seen by others when she reached out to let her daughter wash her hands, he finally realized that something was wrong. When the 2 of them walked to the dining table, and Qi Ting took out the food from the food box, he heard Madame Yang's eyes suddenly light up. He quietly said to Gu Yunka, There are dumplings. They're my favorite food. Qi Ting finally confirmed his thoughts. This Madame Yang didn't seem to be a normal person. Previously, he had not noticed Madame Yang. It should be said that once Gu Dajiang entered, Madame Yang and Gu Yundong's presence were extremely low, except for Gu Yunke, who was in his arms and making faces at him. It was only after Gu Yundong and his grandfather had fought back and forth for 2 rounds that he felt that Gu Yundong was actually a lady who hid her strength. But Madame Yang was very quiet. Even when she was playing puzzles with Gu Yunke, she did not make a sound. Therefore, it was only now that he finally realized that Madame Yang was unusual. However, Qi Ting didn't understand. Even though he had read for so many years and wasn't pedantic, he couldn't understand Gu Dajiang's actions. Towards his wife, who might not be smart, Gu Dajiang was able to stay by her side. This meant that he valued relationships and was a responsible man. Qi Ting admired him. However, when he was out and at such an important and rigorous time in his studies, it was fine if he brought along a capable daughter. However, if he brought along a wife who couldn't help at all, and didn't even understand what they were talking about, or even might drag him down, Qi Ting felt that Gu Dajiang was abnormal. At this moment, he was a little regretful. Wasn't it too much to deliberately arrange for him to be in the Enlightenment lecture hall? Qi Ting was still thinking. When he came back to his senses, he realized that the adult and child opposite him had already eaten more than half of it. He quickly lowered his head to eat. After eating, he still had to ask Gu Yundong about the drawings. He wanted to know who Gu Yundong had learned how to draw. Was it Qingyuan Zhang? However, halfway through his meal, he suddenly felt a strong gaze that made him unable to sit still. Qi Ting suddenly looked up and met Gu Yunke's big watery eyes. He was stunned. What's wrong? Can't eat anymore? The little girl shook her head, but she still stared at him, on the small plate beside him. Qi Ting followed her gaze. He had specially taken out this small plate, and placed it at the side to contain the food he didn't want to eat. Now that he was being stared at by a little girl, Qi Ting inexplicably felt flustered. He glared at the little girl. What are you looking at? You're picky. Gu Yunke pointed at the small plate in front of him and said, You don't eat vegetables. You only eat meat. What's wrong with not eating vegetables? He liked to eat meat. The young lady was young, but she had a lot of control. Qi Ting stuffed a piece of meat into his mouth in front of her. The little girl frowned. Why? The vegetables are so delicious. Listen, they're crispy when you bite them. She even demonstrated as she ate with relish. Qi Ting looked at her little mouth moving, and actually felt that he was a little greedy, as if the vegetables in her mouth were especially delicious. Stop. Delicious my ass. I'm not a rabbit. I don't eat grass. Gu Yunke blinked. Are you a bear? Chapter 614. This person has evil intentions. What bear? Qi Ting suddenly stood up. Are you cursing me? Gu Yunke looked confused. No, I heard from Brother Amao that bears only eat meat. Madame Yang nodded and testified. I heard it too. Qi Ting glared at the mother and daughter. No, he retracted his previous thoughts. Gu Dajiang was not simple at all. Other than Gu Yundong, who hid his strength well, these two were also extremely lethal. They silently scolded him, but he could not blame them. Look at the expressions on their faces. It was as if he had done something wrong. Gu Yunke saw that he seemed to be very angry, and quickly went to Madame Yang's ear and whispered, Mother, we seem to have said something wrong. Sure, let's pretend that we didn't make a sound just now. Let's eat and let him think that it's an illusion. Alright, let's pretend that we don't know that he's picky about food. Don't look up and just muddle through. Yes, let's do that. Qi Ting. If you want to whisper, at least lower your voice. I can hear you. I can hear everything you say, alright? However, the two of them had already lowered their heads. Their faces were almost buried in the bowl, not even showing their eyes. Qi Ting was so angry that he laughed. Can you guys pretend any better? But what could he say? Was he really going to argue with a child and a fool? Qi Ting sat on the chair resentfully, having no appetite at all. Seeing that the two of them were still playing with their chopsticks after eating, he almost couldn't help but fall off the chair. However, in the next moment he could not help but roll his eyes. He suddenly leaned forward and asked softly, Gu Yunke, right? The little girl raised her head. There was still a grain of rice on her tender little face. When Qi Ting saw this, he couldn't help but feel an itch in his hand. He wiped it off with a handkerchief. The little girl was stunned. So he wasn't angry. Fortunately, she was relieved. Hence she nodded and patted her chest. Yes, my name is Guyunka. Can I ask you a few questions? The little girl said generously. Ask me. I'll tell you everything I know. That's right. Her brother had taught her this idiom. Qi Ting was instantly amused. So you know everything? Yes, I know a lot. The little girl was very proud. Although I'm only 4 years old. Is that so? A glint flashed across Qi Ting's eyes. Then tell me, who did your elder sister learn her drawing skills from? Qing Wenzheng? Gu Yunka immediately shrunk her neck. Oh no, she did not know the answer to this question. Moreover, it was about eldest sister. Aunt Ku had said that she could not tell others about eldest sister, especially men. If that happened, eldest sister's reputation would be greatly affected. After thinking for a while, the little girl could only say weakly, Can you change the question? Qi Ting was stunned and pondered for a moment. Perhaps this question was a little difficult for her. Hence, he changed the question. Is your sister very familiar with Qin Wenzheng? He actually wanted to know about Qin Wenzheng. The young lady was unhappy. Why did he keep asking about big sister? He definitely had ill intentions. So she shook her head decisively. I don't know. Qi Ting was impatient. Seeing this, he was a little annoyed. Didn't you say that you know everything? That's right. Gu Yunka looked as if she was telling the truth. Qi Ting said, All right then, tell me, what do you know?